progress.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 7th, 2024 Utility Advisory Commission meeting. We will start with a roll call, starting with Zoom. Commissioner Metz, can you hear? Commissioner Metz, can you hear us?
Yes, present.
And we'll start here. Commissioner Croft, present.
There we go. Commissioner Sharp, present.
Commissioner Forcell, present.
And Chair Siegel, present as well. Welcome everyone. We do not have any changes to the agenda, so we will move to public comments. Are there any comments from the public on an item not on the agenda?
This is Janelle Camion, Program Assistant. If anyone from the public would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand or dial *9 on your phone. There's one member of the public who would like to speak. David Cole, you may speak.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you this evening. I just wanted to say, from my perspective, with the last couple of storms, I think the utility did very well in handling the outages. We were out twice in Barron Park for short periods of time, and it was fixed in less than the time predicted on the website. And the website had a lot of information about the outages, so that was appreciated. I have a little tiny bit of backup power here, so I offered my neighbors if they would like to use Wi-Fi or anything, and they said, no, we're okay. We're having dinner by candlelight. So, you know, the best of the situation in a bunch of terrible storms, and I think you guys did really well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other public comments not on the agenda?
No.
Great. We can move on to the minutes. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes as provided in the packet? Commissioner Forcell?
Here we go. Thanks for your patience. On packet page 13 of the minutes, in the second paragraph, never mind, I've taken poor notes. That was not what I wanted to talk about, and I don't think I marked the thing that I wanted to ask about, so I withdraw. Sorry about that.
No problem. And hopefully it's the same one I have a comment on. Wouldn't that be nice? On page 12 of the packet and page 7 of the document, in the first paragraph, the end of line 5 to line 6, it talks about cost drivers. And one of the cost drivers is water sales reductions. And I think that's misguided. I don't think that's a cost. I think that's a reduction in revenue, which is a separate part of the discussion. So I'd like to clarify that or correct it.
No, but it turns out I did highlight the correct paragraph. I just couldn't load it into my brain fast enough. There was a question about the rate increase to wastewater that left the reserves in a bad place. Mr. Batchelor replied that staff evaluated a 13% increase compared to the 9% proposal, and staff could send it to the UAC after this meeting. And I'm just wondering, did that happen? I've been having trouble with my UAC email. So I'm looking at package page 13, the second paragraph, and I won't read you the whole thing. It was a discussion of wastewater rate increases. And the second sentence of that paragraph, Mr. Batchelor replied that staff evaluated a 13% increase compared to the 9% proposal, and staff could send it to the UAC after this meeting. My question is, did staff send it to the UAC after the meeting? I don't think I saw it.
I don't believe it came. I had that same question.
So I wasn't able to make it last month, but it seems like that would be a good thing to have followed up on.
Yeah, I was just confirming that we did not send that out. So we need to send that back out to all of you.
And is this the same discussion? We did have a budget meeting, subcommittee meeting last week, and it was the same discussion where you did present to us the 13%, right?
So
Correct. Okay,
it'll be the same information.
thank you.
15. It was 15. 15.
And with the one change, I guess the other is just a comment. Does anyone want to move to accept the minutes with the one change? Do I have a motion?
I can move
For
to
the-
accept the minutes.
Okay, and a second? I guess I'll second it. No reason not to. Got quiet commissioners tonight. Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes with the one change on the drought cost, starting with Commissioner Metz,
Yes.
and then Commissioner Crowe?
Yes,
Yes.
Commissioner Purcell?
I'll abstain if I can, since I wasn't there.
Yep. Okay, and I'll say yes as well. So we have. Okay. And Commissioner Motter, do you approve the minutes with the one change? Commissioner Motter, we're going to assume unless we see you that you are attending only and not in your capacity as a commissioner. I understand the circumstances. So I'm sorry about that. And that's fine.
can I ask a question about minutes? Sure. Is that allowed? Which is, in some cases, it's definitely not verbatim. And I wonder if there are verbatim minutes that are like automatically translated or transcribed that might be relied upon with, I know you can't just do that because there are motions and approvals, et cetera. So people do have to go through. It just seems like it's a lot of work probably to write these minutes. And then sometimes, the entire conversation is clearly not captured.
Yeah, and we did have a discussion about this in, I don't know if it was during a meeting or outside a meeting. I believe in the last meeting. Anyway, the rules are such that we do a summary and not a verbatim. Some members of the public have requested it be video recorded, but right now that's the mandate. Great, and with that, we'll turn to Director Batchelor.
Thank you, Chair Siegel. Good evening, Commissioners, Vice Mayor Lowing. Probably one of the big topics portion of it is just to talk a little bit about these power outages that we had this past weekend and then again today. So this past weekend, we experienced atmospheric river. The new outage management system that we put in place sent out 11,888 texts notifying customers of an outage and provided updates to those customers. However, we still received 665 incoming calls and another 339 incoming texts reporting outages. We encourage the customers to ensure to have the most up-to-date contact information in our records so we can provide timely notification about power outages. the community should go update their contact information by MyCPAU or by calling customer service at 650-329-2161. So just a little bit more about that. We had quite a few outages during the Sunday timeframe, impacted at about 5,000 customers. We were able to get the last, if you looked at the outage management map on the outage map, there was about 161 customers that were up in the foothills that were out most of the evening and also most of the day on Monday. The problem with that was there was a large tree that came down over Page Mill. And that's a joint pole with just one of our rare joint poles with PG&E and also ourselves. AT&T is not on that pole that runs up through the hillside there. And so we contacted PG&E. They were not able to respond that evening. Of course, they've had hundreds of thousands of customers out at that period of time. We notified them again on Monday morning, explained the situation, that if they had an ETA for those customers, we made the decision from staff standpoint that we're not going to leave those 161 customers. They couldn't give us an ETA of when they were going to be able to get out there. The way that the pole is stacked, it's that our lines are at the very tip top of the pole. PG&E is underneath us. So we ended up trimming the tree and then putting our stuff back in place. We asked PG&E from a mutual aid standpoint, since we were out there, if they would like for us to put their lines back up. They declined. And so we went ahead and put our lines back up in place. We may have to take a planned outage down the road when PG&E comes back out there. Those customers, I don't know what that feeds for them, but if whatever's feeding off of that line still hasn't been replaced today. So we may have to take a planned outage, since they would have to get in between our primary and then there's some secondary that comes off for ourselves, or they can put protective gear around our line. Then we will be out there making sure that they don't damage our line at that period of time. I think the best thing from a safety precaution, but it's up to PG&E, is I would take the shutdown for a little bit of time, and then they can splice their wires back together. There was no pole damages in any of the outages that we had this past weekend. They were all tree related on the Sunday timeframe. And this 161 customers were up and running by 2:50 Monday afternoon. So they were out for quite some time. We were able to clear the other ones within some timely manners. Our problem was that we had enough resources, but we needed to wait for the tree trimmers to come in, because most of the trees were in the lines. So as they were cutting a tree down and clearing it for us, there would be another tree that fell down. And so resource-wise, we were fine. We utilized our own crews and a crew from our contracting crew to help us that evening. And then today's outage was another 4,000 customers that went down. We lost half of 2 substations. So both substations were offline. And if you looked at the outage map, you could see that they were in glumps. They weren't like sporadic, like a couple over here, and then there was a new 700 over here and 600 over there. They were all within the line. So we patrolled the 60,000 kV line, which is our backbone that ties all of our substations together. And we found large tree branches that were tangled within the 60 kV, as well as one of the lines that goes into one of the other subs. So once we found that, we were able to cut those in the clear. There was no damage to the line, and we were able to get the customers up and running fairly quickly from that outage this morning. If you notice that there's 13 or 14 customers that are still being affected on the outage management map, and they're probably right close to probably about 155 to maybe 160 hours showing that they've been out. But the issue with that is that those customers never went down. That started Friday afternoon. And since we've been deploying AMI, there's a meter or two that are out there that where the sensors have gone bad. And so it's tied to a transformer. And since we've got those 13, 14 customers tied to that transformer, it shows that those customers are actually out, but they're not out. So we're working with Millsoft, who is our provider for the outage management system, to see if there's ways that we can not show incidental outages like this, where it will show it's an AMI. But if you read the description portion of it, it just shows that the customer is actually out of power, but they're not. So we need to figure out a way to get interruptions, because as we start deploying more and more of these AMI devices on the electric meters, we're going to start seeing more of these could pop up on that outage management map, and it'll trace it, and it will stay in the just clicking away on the hours. So again, we're working on that to see what we can do and how we're going to be able to not show those on that map. Because I think that from optic standpoint, it shows that customers have been out for a long period of time. So that's something we do not want to show. Plus, we don't know at that period of time ourselves when we go out there if it's a true outage or if it's actually something going on. So we are working on that to figure out how we're going to fix that problem. So and that's pretty much what I wanted to say, pretty much about what's going on with the outages. Just a little bit about water supply. When we wrote this report, portion of it is slow start. Recent storms have measurable positive impacts, and storage of the Hetch Hetchy system is still above average due to the above precipitation experienced this last year. And with these last periods of storms, I'm sure that the reservoirs are also filling up as well. So we will find out as the city's supplier, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, will be providing more updates later this month regarding the water supply condition and also the rate projections. So by the time that we bring back, we're hoping that by the time we come back in April, that we'll be able to have what those projections are going to be. We think that we're going to be somewhere in line to what the rate increase is that we've talked about in your preliminary meetings. But we won't find out until probably around the April timeframe, maybe even May. So it's going to be right at the very end when we actually get what their increase might look like. Hydro updates as of January 30th. Totals in Northern California are above 23 below the for time of the year. Again, this was when we wrote this. I wrote this in on just January 30th. The Central California, they're about 49% below average. However, the reservoir levels are still slightly higher than average due to last year's wet winter that we had. And the output for the fiscal year is 100% to the long-term average levels of FY25. So we will not see any problems with that, and anything that we get from these storms will definitely help in the hydro side. Gas prices last winter, due to extreme weather and natural gas supply conditions, Palo Alto customers paid nearly $4 per therm of gas used in the month of January, resulting in the largest utility bills. On September the 18th of 23, we went to council to adopt a revised natural purchasing strategy for 23 and 24. December 23rd and January 24 were about 64 cents and 43 cents per therm respectively. Even with the 5.5 long-term strategy that we talked about, that for that insurance that we had to charge for, we're still seeing therms are much less than what we were paying even in 22. So with that, we plan on coming back to council and yourselves with a new strategy and looking at what we can do for the winter times, just to protect ourselves in the future portion, so we don't have the problems that we have. We have not heard back yet from the feds or from the state on the outcome of why those increases were so high last year. It is still being looked at. And as soon as that, we find something out, I'll definitely share with this commission. Some of just of the upcoming details on our workshops. They are online, they register. So Thursday, February the 8th from 5 to 6, save money on EVs. Sunday, February the 25th at 11 noon, Lunar New Year committee event. And then Sunday, March the 10th from 10 to 1 is electric car right for you. So those are online. You can find them at cityofpaloalto.org/workshops. And anybody can feel free to sign up for those workshops. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that the commission, anybody from the commission are more than welcome to make comments if they'd like at the council. This coming Monday night, we are doing a study session with the council to talk about the resiliency and strategic plan that we brought to you last month. And so we are taking for a study session, and you are more than welcome to Zoom it or come in person. And if you'd like to speak, I'll make sure that that happens, that you'll get some time to talk about that if you'd like. But that's, again, that's Monday the 12th. And it's going to be the first thing on because it's a study session. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any commissioner questions? I had two questions for you. One was we've had two different pole inspections that have gone on, one for fiber and one for grid modernization. And I'm wondering whether trees are inspected as part of that.
We don't really look at the trees from an inspection standpoint, but we do look at it from a canopy standpoint, where if they're too close to the lines or as we put this up, we will be doing tree trimming for when we put the fiber. Because remember, the fiber is, I have a photo here later in my report for the grid mod, but the communications is about 20 feet up in the air, and that's where the majority of where the trees are located at. We do look at them, and what we'll do is we'll call urban forest out from our public works group if we feel like if there's a tree that needs to be removed or it's starting to decay. But to do a true intense, looking at the tree it doesn't happen that way unless we see some real reasons why that tree isn't healthy and it needs to be removed or trimmed or whatever it has to be done.
Okay, thanks. And then my other question was, you said these 150 plus or minus customers who are showing us out because of bad sensors in their AMI meters. And that sounds, I don't know, it sounds early to have faulty sensors. Those are pretty new meters. If I'm wondering if you've heard anything from the supplier and how the other meters are going. And just in full disclosure, mine failed as well. Not as part of an outage, but I've had a failure too.
So we think that we've done some preliminary looks at it's how many is it? 1450.
There's only 2 faulty meters I can speak of.
Okay.
Regarding the false outage, there's like 13 customers on that, not 150. And of that, there's 4 customers that have some strange wiring on their side of the system. So that's why it's causing the errors. But in regards to faulty meters, we've only found 2 so far. I don't know if you're one of the 2 for sure, but there's only been 2 of the 4,500 we've installed so far for electric.
Okay, thanks. I should have bought a lottery ticket. Great. And with that, we will move on to new business. Item 2, the SCADA system and cybersecurity update. Do we have any comments from the public?
This is Janelle Camion, Program Assistant. If anyone from the public would like to speak on item number 2, please raise your hand or dial *9 on your phone. No hands raised.
Thank you. Do we have a presentation?
We do, Chair Siegel. So thank you. This was an item that the commission wanted to bring back and get some update portions of it. So I had asked Darren Numoto, who is our Director of Information Technology, and I believe that Raymond Chin, who is our SCADA specialist technician on the line. So we'll be able to answer any of your questions and how that and these will impact anything from a utilities perspective. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Darren.
Good evening, Chair Siegel, Commissioner, excuse me, Commissioners and Vice Mayor Lowing. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you on the important topic of cybersecurity. Next slide, please. So just quick agenda. The first slide will just review how we address cybersecurity as a city as a whole, and then we'll get into the SCADA security as well, and then follow up with the AMI security. Next slide. So these are 7 layers that we focus on as we look at securing the city from cyber attacks. As we all know, in the news, you hear about a different cyber attack almost daily now. It's becoming a very common headline. So my goal is to keep us out of the headline as much as possible. And our primary goal is really to just continually improve on cybersecurity. As we know, the bad actors out there are leveraging technologies at a greater rate than we can. So we're always reacting to them. So our goal is to put systems in place where we can help monitor, detect, and then react quickly enough to prevent it from becoming a major issue. To date, we have been very fortunate. We've been able to mitigate attacks and have not been impacted greatly like some of our counterparts around the Bay Area. But our approach is really to be prepared. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when something's going to happen, and it's going to be how quickly we could be alerted, mitigate it, contain it, and then respond to it, and then eventually recover if needed. So that's been our focus over the last couple of years, is shoring up our internal infrastructure, processes, and procedures to ensure we are prepared and have the resources to respond accordingly. And some of those resources are CISA. It's a federally funded agency, and we use them not only for intel in terms of common threats that are out there currently, but also they have services that we are going to start taking advantage of that can come on site and help us evaluate our cybersecurity posture, not only for IT, but for our SCADA systems as well. And those discussions are in talks right now, and we're hoping to have better start some exercises towards the later half of this year with them, and that they'll come on site and help us really understand some of our gaps that we have in our policies and procedures and our technology. And then of course we can help mitigate even better. So again, our goal is continually improve, and that's the only way we can keep ahead of the bad actors out there. Also, one of the core goals is, again, securing our data is the primary, and the way we do that is really around not only the security that we implement, but also training our users to be aware of the common methods that the bad actors are using to try to get access. It has shifted from the earlier years where they would, attack a firewall, try to poke holes in your security or perimeter security. Now it's really attacking the human layer and using email as one of those primary methods of that. And that's one of our challenges. One of the stats out there is it's changes, but right now it's about 60% of email worldwide is spam. So again, that's in line with our tools and systems that we see. 60% of email never even make it to staff because of our systems that detect it and quarantine it as spam. Unfortunately, there are some cases where legitimate emails get caught, but that's the caveat of making sure that we secure our email infrastructure. And we provide security awareness training annually for staff that they have to go through, and we are enhancing that to be able to provide more specialized training for different types of staff that especially are in our IT, we have senior staff that have elevated privileges, so we need to provide specialized training from them or for them as well. Cloud security, as you know, a lot of applications are in the cloud now. That's another challenge for us. How do we secure it when we don't own the infrastructure? We don't control the infrastructure. So during the procurement process, we vet them by looking at a business impact assessment as well as a vendor information security assessment to make sure they're following the proper guidelines. So they are prepared not only to prevent, but react if needed and to notify us if there are any security issues in a timely manner. I've already mentioned email security, and this past year we actually implemented a IT risk assessment program. So we're in the process of evaluating all the different solutions, applications, networks in our city to really understand that risk. And the outcome of that is to understand our what we call priority 1 systems, which are the most critical systems for the city to operate. And those are our core focus on how we protect. And then, of course, in the case that we do have to recover, that we're able to recover those systems effectively. Next slide. So in terms of SCADA, Raymond's on the line. So if I misspeak or if there's additional questions that I may not be able to answer, he's on the line to be able to answer those. I won't go over these line by line, but this is really our approach to SCADA. And one of the unique things for us is it's actually behind our city infrastructure. So it's one layer removed from direct access to the internet. And the SCADA information itself is what we called air gapped from the network. So again, city staff or people on the network are not able to access the SCADA network. There's special processes that Raymond and team have where they have to get in and be able to manage the SCADA network. So that's how we protect the SCADA network. It's not directly exposed to the internet. And we implement the same protocols there, multi-factor authentication, VPN services, and implementing DMZ infrastructure where that helps air gap that system. And during the pandemic, we've tailed off on having regular meetings with the cybersecurity red team, and we're looking at spinning that back up this year. And that really is just meeting on a quarterly basis with the utilities team just to review what we're doing and making sure we're continuing to improve how we protect the SCADA environment and the critical infrastructure. And a common question we hear all the time is what happens if something does happen in the SCADA system, whether it's a system fault, whether it's a potential cyber attack. We've talked about it, and we had some tabletop exercises regarding this, and really what it would take is just to start operating the SCADA network manually, meaning having staff on site at the different areas to be able to control the power. So again, that would be our default, is going into manual mode, which would be a stress on site on staff, but again, that would be the worst case scenario. Some of the enhancements that I'm aware of, we're enhancing how we provide perimeter security, meaning surveillance, outside of our substations and so forth, and looking at upgrading some of the legacy SCADA devices as well to more current devices. And what I can do here is, I know that's a fair area of focus. We can pause here for any questions on this slide before we get into AMI, or should we just move on and have questions at the end? Okay, sure. Next slide, please. So as it was just talked about, AMI is a fairly new technology for us, but in working with our vendors, we ensured it met our standards in terms of how we secure our data center using DMZs, VPNs, firewalls, looking at how we harden the OSs and ensure we have patching as part of our standard operating procedures. And EDR is an endpoint detection and response system, so it's just helping to monitor and detect any potential threats, and then we can react accordingly. Similar requirements, remote access requires multi-factor authentication. Again, role-based access, meaning that only qualified or authorized staff have access to the infrastructure. And, again, we implement similar technologies in terms of intrusion detection and so forth. And the messaging is all encrypted. And, sorry for all the acronyms, but HSM is Hardware Security Module. That's all it stands for. Apologies for all the acronyms, but if I spell them all out, it would get lengthy on the slide. With that, I think that's the last slide. And Raymond, if you're online, if you have anything to add or something I missed or misspoke, please chime in.
Yeah, you pretty much got everything.
Thank you. So with that, and I also have Parag Kumar, he's our IT operations manager online for any additional questions on that, more for the city IT security side of the house.
Any commissioner comment? Commissioner Sharp?
So with all of the protections you have in place, has anyone with similar protections been hacked and, threat actors with ransom? Because you hear about a bunch of cities in the Bay Area have had ransomware. And I don't think it's been for their utilities, but no one else has utilities.
There have been some utilities that have been impacted.
So, but did they have the same stuff you have, or were they, I mean, it's obviously,
I
you
don't
just
know.
went through all this stuff. It frankly, I can't judge if that's safe or if that's not safe. I mean, it sounds good, but I have literally no idea.
Yep, understood. And unfortunately, we do share a lot of information with our agencies, right? And we do use similar technologies. But most of the attacks, what happens, and even with the larger corporations such as Visa, Equifax, right? It's what I mentioned. They infiltrate a user that has elevated access. It's not necessarily the solutions. It's really using the person and that persona to gain access to the systems. And that's where multi-factor authentication comes in. That's where monitoring comes in, and some of the controls that we put in place and solutions we put in place to understand anomalies, meaning if a user is in San Jose and all of a sudden we get an authentication request from another part of the US or even another country, that request will get alerted and blocked, right? So again, those are.
I'm assuming the way this works, as I said, I know very little about it, so I apologize up front. But normally it seems to me it's the phishing scams, right?
Yes.
Somebody says, click on this link, you click on the link and it downloads some sort of malware. That's sort of my understanding of how it works.
Yes.
Right? Then they take control and they copy keystrokes or they do whatever. Do the things we have in place, if someone does click on a link, are we safer on that, or could that basically happen anyway? And if it happened tomorrow, we've done the best, but it could happen. And if it happens, it happens. Or is it not likely to? Because it seemed to me when you said, we're going to notice if they click, I assume they're smart enough to use a VPN to actually click from here, not from out of the country or one of the obvious things, right? I mean, people do take all these things over and they seem to be successful.
Yeah. And you're right. That's how a lot of the ransomwares and so forth start, with somebody clicking on a link or allowing that. So we do, as I mentioned, in the past couple of years, we've implemented a lot of tools to help mitigate those. And I will never state that it won't happen, because it's not possible, right? There's always a possibility it could happen, but the controls and the solutions we put in place help decrease those chances greatly, right? Even to the point where when they're not on net, meaning on the city's network or VPN'd in, we have technologies in place on the laptop to still protect it, even though we don't have direct visibility. So we've extended our visibility on the endpoints, meaning the laptops, mobile devices, and so forth. So we're implementing best practices, and that's all we can do at this point. And I can't sit here and say we'll never be compromised. It's just a matter of how quickly we can notice the anomaly and then react to it, stop it, and then of course mitigate and recover.
So I had one other question. I spoke with a council member for a city who was, compromised. They had the ransomware, and what they talked about was how it was really their police department stuff and other things, because they weren't in the cloud. And everything that was in the cloud, while they had the ransomware, they could wipe their system, but they could get the stuff back and reboot their financial systems and all of that because they'd put it in the cloud. Whereas stuff that wasn't in the cloud, when they wiped their systems, they had to rebuild it from scratch. That was at least was my layman's understanding of what he told me. So when you said all the servers are on site, I asked myself the question, is that safer or is that less safe? Because if you get infected, you can't recover it.
Yep. And there's many different approaches. And when we said the servers are on site, that means they're in an air gap network where they're not generally accessed by, or they don't have access to the internet, nor can they be compromised through normal channels, right? But you're spot on. There are some services that we just can't put in the cloud at this point, legacy systems and so forth. We do have a hybrid environment. So we do, for instance, our Microsoft infrastructure is all hosted by Microsoft. So that's in Microsoft's cloud. We do host our ERP system in AWS. So we are starting to move down that path, but it becomes the shift between running in a capital environment and operating, right? And when you're in the cloud, you're paying for the services month over month in usage. So the costs become greater and greater. So it's balancing that hybrid world. But you're right, it does expose us more to have infrastructure on site, but we have the tools in place to help monitor and mitigate as best as possible at this point. And again, threats are evolving every day, and that's why we keep in touch with CISA and so forth to help understand the threat landscape out there.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Metz?
Yes, on packet page 20, presentation page 3, there's a sort of hierarchy structure. I had a technical question. Where do devices like meters and sensors and controllers, those sorts of things, that come preloaded with, that are hardware also loaded with software, where do they fit into the structure? And as you know, I'm sure that these have been targets for attack, and just like to know, what are we doing to address that? Something that comes, packed with software when we buy it.
And Raymond can chime in, but that's into the critical assets side of it, where we have inventory of assets and versions that they're on. So again, within those alerts that we get from different agencies, there will be alerts around firmware or vulnerabilities, just like we get software updates on our cell phones and so forth, right? So there are updates for these systems, and it's a matter of ensuring that we continually provide or update the firmwares and softwares on those systems, as well, continually hardening them. Raymond, any other comments?
Yeah, that's correct. The vendors will send out emails that there's firmware updates. And like you said, at first, it's air gap. None of the SCADA devices in the field have connection to internet at any time. So it makes it really hard for it to be compromised.
Right, but the point is that, there are famous cases where such devices, came preloaded with, some kind of virus or, evil actor software.
So you're talking about the supply chain challenges out there right now, right? Where, chipsets have vulnerabilities that are built into them. That's where we rely on our vendors and ensure that when we get the devices, if there are potentials, the firmware updates would take care of those gaps. But again, that is one of the risks that all of us are subject to. But with the amount of intel out there, the vendors should be alerting us promptly if that is the case, and provide us firmwares to mitigate that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Forcell?
I'm curious, has the city ever hired an outside firm to do penetration testing?
Yes.
How did that go?
It would provide us a lot of great information. So we actually contracted with CISA, and a federally funded agency, and they came on site and did it was a good 4 days of investigation in our network. No major findings, just some systems that needed to be patched or some holes to be plugged, but they didn't find anything. So that was both an external penetration scan as well as an internal penetration scan. We didn't scan the SCADA networks just because they are air gapped, and with the sensitivity of that information, it would be a much greater challenge, right? So again, that's something that we are looking towards the end of the year, as I mentioned, to do a more in-depth overview of our SCADA networks with CISA.
And did the testing include targeting the human layer?
Yes. So even with that, we do initiate testing with our staff members through companies. And again, it includes sending them phishing emails, and then we get a register on who clicked on them. And then of course, if they do click on them, we provide more training to them to help mitigate it. So yes, we do that on a biannual basis now. We may increase that over time.
I guess I had a couple follow-up, similar thought to Commissioner Forcell. Because we know that the human layer is the most vulnerable layer, and I think we've talked about this in the past, that annual training sounds too infrequent to me, and biannual sounds even more problematic. And so when an employee is caught in a phishing, just a test, it seems like that's something that the entire staff should be aware of, not identifying the employee, but just as a training mechanism, to say this was false and these might be the clues for the future to help hone in awareness.
Yeah, and we've onboarded a new platform to help with security training as well as phishing. So we are planning on increasing the frequency, even to the point where it could just be an ongoing basis throughout the year and spot, because what happens, of course, with our current method is we blast out phishing emails to a lot of staff members. And then of course, everybody said, oh, did you get that email? Did you get that? So it reduced the impact, and we realize that. So we're going to be implementing a more frequent testing of our staff, but also some of the tools and technology we put in place with Microsoft and other tools. They have intel on sites that are malicious, links that are malicious. So if somebody does click on something malicious, we'll get notified immediately, and we work with that user. So, and those actually get blocked by default. So that's another layer that we address.
That's good. And I was wondering whether there are any systems in place so that if some employee fell for a phishing attack, I don't know, 6 months or a year ago or 2 years ago, to protect us from, bad actors just sort of lying in wait for the right opportunity to go forward. Do we have protections from that?
We do. The tools that we put in place monitor all outbound connections. And of course, the CISA and some of our vendors have access to the databases of known threat actors out there. And so they're able to detect traffic destined for those places. And I think I just read an article, AnyDesk is a common tool that's used, right? And even their infrastructure got compromised, but fortunately, I had staff look at traffic for AnyDesk application, and we did not see anything. So again, once we hear about certain threats or vulnerabilities out there, we do go back and look at our infrastructure and ensure that we don't have that similar software, or we see traffic that was noted.
Thanks. And then the final one was, so I think you said somewhere 48 hours to bring back a system. And I'm wondering if that includes those that are not in the cloud, and whether we have backups for those where there's a similar time frame to bring them back up.
That was more specifically on the SCADA network side. On the IT side, we do have DR, we have backups that continually happen multiple times a day. And one of our plans this year is to shore up our disaster recovery plans and highlight, that's where I mentioned tagging some of or labeling some of our systems as high priority, which means, should be a very quick recovery time, and then scaling down from there. But overall, with our critical systems, we're fairly confident we can recover within 48, 72 hours. Of course, because of backups, there is a potential of losing some work, but it's not going to be days, it'll be hours. On the SCADA side, talking with Raymond, he's comfortable with that 48 hours to get systems back online.
Thanks. Any other commissioner comments? Yeah, Commissioner Forsyth.
I'm wondering if you can talk just a little bit more about the after hours laptop. Just like
Can you move to the SCADA side, please?
yeah, I guess I'm curious, like, what does this SCADA access look like? Is it a web-based access? Is it a specialized app? Are these laptops like fully functional laptops that if they're not connected to VPN, you can read emails, send text messages, go to Facebook, do whatever? Or are they like extremely dedicated to just the SCADA function?
I'll let Raymond chime in, but my understanding they're dedicated just for the support function. And once they get into our network, they don't have access to the internet. So
what applications are on the after hours laptop?
I'll let Raymond answer that.
It's just for SCADA only. They don't use it for checking email or using it for surfing the web and stuff.
So there's, it's
stripped
not
down.
like you can check your email until you connect to VPN.
No.
All you do with this laptop.
Correct.
And again, is the SCADA access web-based or is it a dedicated app of some kind?
I'd rather not say
Okay,
for security purposes.
understood. Thank you.
Actually, moving to the physical security, I had one more question because it said planned, and how are the plans going?
They are in construction right now. Beginning of the construction, or some of the substations, they're putting lights and security cameras. So we're in the early stage.
And were there, I thought there were gonna be higher walls or some physical security in addition to the monitoring security?
That part I'm not sure, but just the monitoring securities, I know for sure.
You may be referring to Colorado substation where they're going to put a fence around it.
So, yeah, so as we talked in the past, that Colorado is going to have new walls put all the way around it. There'll be taller walls, and they will be blast-proof and bulletproof, and they will go up somewhere probably in the range of about 15 feet above. So they'll be much taller than what we have right now. We just have a wood chain link fence basically around there today.
Any estimate of the time for that?
No, that we're still working on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 3, a discussion of the residential electric and water utility customer satisfaction survey. And before Ms. Elbert comes up, do we have any comments from the community?
This is Janelle Camion, Program Assistant. If anyone from the public would like to speak on item number 3, please raise your hand or dial *9 on your phone. No hands raised.
So we do have a presentation tonight. We thought that would be important for the commission to understand the recent survey that we did. And we wanted to highlight some of the areas that where we did very well, and then some of the areas that we need to do a little bit of work with from our residents. So I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Everett, who is our communications manager, to walk us through this.
Thank you, Director Batchelor. As Director Batchelor mentioned, my name is Catherine Elbert. I am the Utilities Communications Manager. It's a pleasure to be with you here tonight. Thank you for your time. And we are here to present the results of a recent customer satisfaction survey that we conducted. We conducted customer satisfaction surveys for 2 of our utilities, electric and water. So different survey sample groups were questioned for each of these surveys. And I will provide you with the overview of the project, the survey methodology, and the results for the different survey responses. So in partnership with the California Municipal Utilities Association, CMUA, of which the City of Palo Alto Utilities, of course, is a member, we often conduct customer surveys because it's an important benchmark to understand where we are as a utility, to get the perspective of our customers, and to also provide some direction on some of the decisions that we make, the policies that we make, what is important to the community. So we worked with CMUA this last year and their contractor, Great Blue Research, to conduct these surveys. And so Great Blue Research conducted a survey statewide of municipal and investor-owned utility customers. We opted in to then have them conduct what's called an oversample survey in Palo Alto, so specifically of our City of Palo Alto Utilities customers, and that allows us to ask some questions that are really important to us as a utility for our specific area and do a deeper dive into what our customers' interests and perspectives are. So the purpose of these surveys is to gain a deeper understanding of satisfaction from our customers. And the research outcomes will enable City of Palo Alto Utilities personnel to more clearly understand and ultimately set our customer expectations and act on near-term opportunities for improvement, and also create a strategic roadmap to increase customer satisfaction. So before the surveys were conducted, we worked with Great Blue Research to identify specific goals, objectives, and areas of investigation prior to the survey implementation. And ultimately, these research studies will provide both CMUA member utilities as a whole and also Palo Alto with actionable insights and recommendations to better improve our organization. And so we dove into a number of topics, both for electric and water customers, including organizational characteristics, which are important to our customers. And of course, looking at various components that are really important to us, such as reliability, quality, customer service, preferred methods of receiving information, perception of our emergency preparedness and response, interest and awareness of our programs. And if you care to ask any questions, we do have some demographic information for the folks who responded to the surveys. So the surveys were conducted in September and October of 2023. Statewide, about 1,200 customers were surveyed for each electric utility and water utility. And for the oversample, 400 Palo Alto respondents for each were questioned. Great Blue Research collected data from a statistically significant statewide random sampling of the targeted customer base. And we will dive into each of those different customer surveys in just a moment, but first of all, you can see on the slide, you can go back to this slide, thank you very much, a little bit of the research methodology. So these surveys were all digital. You can see how many questions we had for each utility, and also a measure of our confidence level and the margin of error. Next slide, please. Okay, and we can go to the next slide, please. So,
Can I interrupt with a quick question?
yes,
You
please.
mentioned twice the Palo Alto oversample.
mhm.
Can you describe what that is?
Sure. So the statewide survey was conducted by the consultant Great Blue Research. And so it was a random sampling of municipal utility customers and investor-owned utility customers throughout California. And then what we did is we opted in for what they call an oversample for Palo Alto. So we specifically provided our customer contact information to the consultant to contact those customers, also a random sampling, to just talk to Palo Alto customers with an overlay of the questions that were asked statewide for other customers, but also expanded to ask some questions that are really important to us specifically. Oversample sounds like a little bit of an awkward word, but that's what that means.
Was this 400 customers who completed the survey in Palo Alto for each of, and were they different customers for water and electric?
That is correct. We did not survey the same group of customers for the electric survey and the water survey.
So it's correct that they're different
Correct.
sets of customers. And they were sampled by the consultants, but it says sample provided by CPAU. You provided a list of potentials and then they picked 400 at random?
That is correct. We provided them with our customer contact information from our billing system.
And every customer that was surveyed responded? Or did they have?
The way that the survey methodology works is the consultant will try to reach out to a random sampling of folks, and as soon as they receive 400 or approximately 400 responses, they will conclude the survey.
You don't know how many they asked to get the 400, though?
I don't.
Okay. And you said you had the demographics. Did you check that the demographics broadly matched household demographics? So there was no enormous bias?
Right. So interestingly enough, we did find that the greater number of respondents were folks in the age demographic of roughly 55 to 64 years of age. And we looked at also, did we receive responses from more people who were homeowners or renters? And probably not surprisingly, we received a greater number of respondents who state that they own a home than renters. Actually, when I go into some of the results of the water survey, I think that you'll find some of the responses a little bit interesting between the homeowners and the renters. But yes, we do have those demographic profiles, and I'm happy to go over those in greater detail if you like.
Thanks. And is this the first year we've done this, or is this something we've done historically?
This is something that we have done historically, at least for the past 2 or 3 decades or so, dating back to before my time. However, we do like to do this in partnership with CMUA because it allows us to provide some comparison data between ourselves and other municipal utility customers, but then also to look at the differences in how our customers are responding to various characteristics for us as a public utility versus those who are provided utility service by an IOU, an investor-owned utility.
No, I think that's great. Just one comment is, if it's being done historically, it's often good to look at, and I would like to see, maybe in the future, how it's changed over time, because that sometimes even more than the absolute levels, that gives you some indication that you're improving or perhaps not improving on certain dimensions. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that is why we like to conduct these surveys year over year to look at trends, to look at changes. I will note that in the past 2 years, CMUA began contracting with a new vendor for these customer surveys. And the new vendor attempted to gain historical data from the previous vendor used for these surveys, and they were unable to do so for all customer type surveys dating back historically, unfortunately. So there are some gaps in the data at our historic trends, but moving forward, we're going to make sure that that's not an issue.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I would like to go over some high-level key study findings, and it was really great having the consultant present these to our utilities executive leadership team. There was a lot to unpack. I have condensed this information into only a couple handfuls of slides, but if you care to see it anymore, we can certainly follow up with you later. But overall, as it relates to our electric customer satisfaction surveys, City of Palo Alto Utilities received very high marks. In fact, our ratings were significantly higher than those that were received for Northern California as a region and also the state of California as a whole. So customers provided us with an average positive rating of 70.9% when rating us on a series of organizational characteristics, which I will drill down into in more detail. But this is higher than averages provided by municipal customers in Northern California and the state. Our net positive score, which is an interesting measurement, it's a measurement of our advocates, customers who would consider themselves loyal, and customers who would consider themselves satisfied with the service that we provide. That net positive score is a little over 82%, which is also slightly higher than the national average. Now, sometimes we refer to a metric called Net Promoter Score. The net positive score is a different metric. I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, where the Net Promoter Score is a metric to measure the likelihood that somebody might recommend a company, an organization, or a product to somebody else. So the net positive score that the survey consultant was looking at is just where are our customers falling in the level of satisfaction. So 82% for us. I thought this was interesting, a positive response. When asked how frequency City of Palo Alto Utilities meets their expectations, nearly 80% or 4/5 of customers reported that their expectations are met all or most of the time, which is significantly higher than the frequency of customers in Northern California and in the state as a whole. Additionally, our rating is consistent with the national average, though. Most importantly, the characteristic, actually, next slide, please. As you can imagine, one of the most important characteristics for our customers is outage response, restoration, and communication. And when asked questions about our outage preparedness and our response, the key finding is that about 25% believe that CPAU is prepared to handle an emergency, which is less than the frequency of customers in Northern California and the state. However, I want to note that some of the responses to that question allowed somebody to respond, not sure, or I don't know. And what that means is that tends to pull that percentage, that rating down. So when talking to our expert, the contractor for this survey, they said that means that those people either likely have never experienced an outage, maybe they're a new customer, or they haven't experienced an outage recently, which is actually good. So you might look at this percentage as positive. And as it relates to outage communications, we did confirm that the most preferred channel is automated text message, with the highest number of respondents choosing this option. Email and automated phone calls were the next in line for preferred channels. And just want to note that the adoption of our new outage management system, which enables text message notifications, should improve these scores, these ratings moving forward in future surveys.
This just makes me ask one question. You said the surveys were done digitally, so was it all by email?
Correct.
Okay, so that kind of biases that.
That's possible. Yes,
response, right?
that is possible. I do have some information to share on how customers prefer to communicate with us as a utility versus in the way of reaching out to us for information versus how they prefer to receive information from us. Customers prefer to communicate with us from their perspective from a more traditional method, for example, a phone call, a visit in person, maybe an email, and then on the contrary, conversely, customers prefer to receive information from us through digital means of communications. Might be a text message, might be an email, might be the website. Just something to keep in mind. Not surprisingly, respondents in slightly older age demographic tend to lean more towards preferring communication through traditional methods, paper, for example, bill inserts. The younger demographics tend to prefer more digital communication. But yeah, that's just important for us to kind of put in our toolkit to make sure that we are diversifying how we reach out to the different customer groups. Okay, so we asked a lot of questions about electric vehicles. It's obviously a very important focus for us. It's a priority. And our survey respondent was actually quite surprised to find how high our adoption of electric vehicles is in Palo Alto. They've never seen marks this high. So 3 out of 10 CPAU customers reported that they already own an EV, and that's about 22 percentage points higher than the frequency of customers in the state of California as a whole who reported the same. When broken down by age, at least 25% of customers in each age group owns an electric vehicle. Interestingly enough, or maybe not surprisingly, customers aged 55 to 64 have the highest rate of ownership, which is significantly higher than those aged 65 or older. The interest in buying an electric vehicle is high for all age groups, with at least 40% of customers in each age group being likely to purchase one. However, there is significantly higher interest in purchasing an EV among customers 55 years of age and younger compared to those 65 years of age and older. When somebody was asked why are you not interested in purchasing an electric vehicle? What might be the barrier? The barriers were listed as long charge time, limited range, and distance per charge, higher initial cost to purchase, and other barriers include the low availability of charging stations, also low availability of EV options. So these are all elements that we will take into consideration.
Were those concerns different by age group?
I would have to look back at the data. That's a good question. I'm going to follow up with you on that. Okay, next slide, please. We also asked quite a few questions about electrification. We found that 2/3 of customers indicated that they strongly or somewhat support CPAU investing in electrification, with over 1/3 indicating they strongly support these investments. We found this to be true for customers of all age groups. Nearly 1/2 of customers reported that they are aware of CPAU's program for residents to switch from gas water heaters to electric heat pump water heaters. Age has a positive correlation with this awareness, where customers are significantly more aware as age increases, interestingly enough. Over 1/2 of CPAU customers reported considering the purchase of any electrification product, with more considering a purchase of a heat pump water heater, followed by heat pump HVAC system, followed by induction stoves. Now, while not statistically significant, those aged 55 to 64 reported a greater consideration of electrification products than those under the age of 55 years. Also, significantly more homeowners reported awareness of CPAU's electrification program than renters. This is something that we are going to consider as well for actions moving forward. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide is a listing of the various organizational characteristics that we wanted to question our customers about, including what is most important to them for what we provide as a utility in terms of our service and our communication, and also how they would rate us for those various elements. You'll see that in the columns under total positive ratings, there's a column for CPAU, next to it a column for Northern California, next to it California, and follow that on the right is for nationwide. So there is a comparison between our region, the state as a whole, and nationwide, so you can get a sense of how we are ranking for these various elements. The top-rated characteristics among CPAU customers are providing consistent and reliable electric service to customers, restoring power in a reasonable amount of time after an outage, providing good service and value for the cost of electricity, and maintaining modern and reliable infrastructure. Conversely, customers placed less emphasis on CPAU communicating with customers, offering innovative programs and services, and our community involvement. I will say that our ratings are higher than Northern California and California nationwide for 10 out of the 11 characteristics. So I view that as positive.
Did you know that Northern California and California, for the most part, do worse than the nation?
That's interesting.
Right? So, I mean, it's sort of like it's not too proud to be better than California or Northern California, right?
Well,
we're better than the nation as a whole substantially, and we should be proud of that. But I mean, I think we should notice that.
The awareness of electrification is significantly higher in our area, Palo Alto as a whole, compared to nationwide, of course. But perhaps that's not surprising. I mean, we have to consider, one, we're on a coast. Our politics are often quite different. Our environmental perspectives and actions are quite different than a large swath of the nation. But yeah, it's interesting to see those differences.
But I'm not going to argue much, but look at being committed to green, well, where is it? Being committed to green, renewable, carbon-free energy, right? I mean, look how California does it a whole. Right? I mean, it's not great.
I view our 83% as quite positive.
No, it is. I mean, we're blowing it away, right? We're doing fantastic.
Keep up the good work, commissioners.
So one question I had is, Does California include Northern California or is it Southern California? And it kind of comes from the next slide where you say California has 878 respondents, Northern California 348. Are those 348 part of the 878 of California?
They are. So the reason why we pull out that subset is to show a comparison with our regional neighbors.
So California includes Northern California here. So the other parts of California are substantially lower
As a
than
whole,
Northern
it's an
California
average.
in order to
Mhm.
make this
Mhm.
the average, right?
Correct.
So it's our north-south divide that we keep hearing about, Northern Cal.
Two different
Southern
states
California.
almost.
So I would want you to address the maintaining modern, reliable infrastructure. And you know we're going to get to that.
Yeah, we dug into that. That's a really interesting one. And what the consultant concluded is that in fact, we have a more detailed slide that I can follow up with you on later, is it's important to customers that we maintain a modern and reliable infrastructure. We didn't get rated very highly on that characteristic, but the interpretation is that perhaps we're just not doing enough to communicate about what we are doing to make sure that we are keeping our infrastructure up to date. So that's something that I'm taking back. This is a takeaway for me and Director Batchelor, is that we really need to be out there talking about our operations, what we are doing.
So your view is that the perception is incorrect. Would that be a fair statement?
Well, I'm not sure if I agree with that 100%. I think that the perception is that, that this is talking just about the reliability of infrastructure, but it's all around outages in my mind. It's just like today, 4,000 customers go down. We were able to restore with a short period of time. And the thing is that if we underground the entire city, we wouldn't have any outages. However, the thing is that if we did have that same outage and it was underground, I can guarantee you that it was not going to be coming back up within 2.5 hours, because there's no way that we're going to be able to do it. But these past winter storms that we saw on Sunday night and today, like I said, they were all tree related. And so, and as I go into this next topic, when we talk about a little bit more about the grid mod, even though that we're going to harden the system and we're going to rebuild the infrastructure, we're going to put brand new into the ground and in the overhead, there's still going to be outages. And I think that people need to understand that, that is not going to fix this problem with any kind of the outage portions. And I think that question is, it's not so much about maintaining the modern and reliable infrastructure. I think the feeling is that we don't do a very good job on maintaining it. And then we still have these outages that happen. So I truly believe that that's where this comes from. Because when I look at the survey that we came to you last year, if you think about it, we were rated fairly low, even lower than this last time. But then we had those windstorms that happened in February, March timeframe. No, I'm sorry. It was in the middle of the summertime when we had all those outages. We just did the survey in October. So it was in the first part. And so I believe that the perception is that service is terrible because we can't keep the lights on.
But what does the data show in the rest of California in terms of outages then? I mean, obviously you'd think that other communities would perceive things the same way. If they have a lot of outages, they would perceive they don't have it. But yet they're doing, 10 points better than us in California, in the US, and in Northern California. So do you think we just have a population that's more critical? I mean, that could be a completely valid thing in Palo Alto.
It could be. I also think that, and I think that we could probably debate this statement, but, we're not in a rural area. So even though that in a rural area where some of these areas are located at, trees are not a factor. With this being so condensed and the tree canopy that we have compared to some other cities, and all the growth that these new cities are having, and they're putting everything in the underground sections. And so what happens is the balance was that maybe, your overhead was 90-10 for your system, but now you have land that you're going to build. And so what you do is you see all this new undergrounding that's getting put in on developing standpoint, and now it's flopped. Now the thing is that you're 70-30, and knowing that big housing push throughout the United States and also in California, I think that has a factor for us here.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Thank you. Timing makes a big difference in how people will respond to a survey. Yeah.
I have
I
one other
guess,
I was just going to basically say, do we ever know what Alameda and Santa Clara's surveys, do they do surveys like this? Do we share that information? Do we know what they get?
We do
how we
have
do
their,
compared to them?
yeah, we do have their information. Not all NCPA members participated in these surveys. A handful did. And we do have a comparison of our results to the average of those NCPA members.
So
who have
not the
participated.
actual
So
members.
not, yeah, it's not broken out by specific member utility, although we might be able to get that data.
I think it would be much more helpful to look at Alameda and Santa Clara because, or maybe even Roseville too. But I mean, Ukiah and I forget the little ones. There's like all these tiny little rural ones, you know what I mean? It's probably not the same. Whereas, Alameda, Santa Clara, are probably pretty similar.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess the part that creates a little cognitive dissonance for me is the difference between doing so well on providing consistent and reliable electric service to customers and then maintaining modern and reliable infrastructure. So if it had been people had an outage, I would expect them to go low on the first one too, and everybody else is really close together on those. So that one seems like it would be good to have an explanation of, why we're doing so great on one and so terrible on the other. And I can't think of a good reason. Again, if it's like people that experienced outage or were thinking about outages, they would not rate as high on consistent and reliable electric service. So, maybe it is the communication side of it. I don't know if this included people who said they don't know, or is this all people, is this the fraction of people who said yes? Doesn't include people who say, I don't know what.
This
Our
is the
infrastructure.
average of everybody who responded, whether or not they responded yes, no, favorably or unsure, I don't know. So some of those answers could
Well, what's
pull the
the
data
total
one way or the
positive
other.
rating though is people who said yes or what was, 7 to 10 shown without don't know responses. So that's the percentage of people who actually filled out 7 to 10 and leaves out the don't knows. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, are you asking if the folks who responded, I don't know, or unsure were taken out of this data to not skew the average? Am I understanding your question
Yes,
correctly?
because you mentioned that as a potential factor in the previous.
Yes, that is a potential factor. I believe that all of those answers were included here.
But it says without don't know responses up at the top. So maybe we could look into that.
Yes, you are correct. Sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah, it's just the difference between the two. Again, kind of like I'd say if people had just experienced an outage, I think they would rank us low on the first one.
I think
But
my perspective on this is that I think the thing is that I would expect that this number might be even a little higher in my mind. And the reason for this portion of it is we're not leaving customers out for 12 hours.
I'm sorry, you're not what?
We're not leaving customers out for 12 hours. Or as I mentioned to this joint poll portion of these customers have been out since Sunday, whatever that feeds. I don't know, maybe it doesn't have any customers and that's the reason why it's a low priority for PG&E. But the thing is that when we restore power, I mean, it's just like today, we had 4,000 customers. We were able to get out there. Of course, we're going to be much quicker during the daytime than, after hours or on the weekends. But I think though that I'd have to say that I'm very proud of the group that we restore power fairly quickly. It may be more often, but I think though that customers might be out for, I'd have to look at and go back and probably take an average of all the outages that we had last year and then just look at what time the restoration portion of it. But I gotta believe it's probably in that 4 to 5 hour range at the most. And that's why I say I would be surprised that that number wasn't a little higher just from a restoration standpoint.
Interesting. I mean, I would even suggest that in future surveys, you might ask people as a factual question, if you experienced an outage in the last, put it to the end of the survey so they don't get anchored on it at the beginning. But have you experienced an outage in the last 2 months? If so, were you satisfied with the way it was? And
Sure.
then see if that correlates with these others.
In case in point, my husband just told me that we finally got power back at our house just about 20 minutes ago after Sunday afternoon's initial power outage from PG&E.
I had a slightly different take on that question about maintaining modern and reliable infrastructure. And admittedly, the reliable throws it off a little bit. But my thought was, because we have such a high Tesla penetration and we have such a high interest in electrification, and we have so many remodels going and they're not allowed to put in gas. And in all three of those situations, the customer has to confront whether they have enough power in their home, whether they have to upgrade their panel, and often the answer is yes. And so to me, I look at it as like kind of I don't know, is it the inverse or the converse of being, more committed to electric vehicles and electrification and having to pay for it as an individual customer.
I had a slightly even different take and a question. Sorry. Which was, do you have any write-in comments on these questions? And my other thought was, I think I took the survey actually, that the perception, I agree that there's cognitive dissonance between the first question and this question. And one of the elements just might be, it's not very pretty to see those wires overground, right? And I think people, if they're thinking what a modern system would be, they might be thinking those should be underground. And especially there are a lot of customers who have it going right through their backyard, a big line up there, and it just doesn't look very modern. And so I think, especially if we're not changing that, that could be part of the perception as well.
For this specific set of questions, there were no open-ended text boxes for people to provide comments. We can possibly ascertain some information on why somebody might answer a question a certain way from other questions in which there may have been some open-ended opportunities, but not from these. So yeah, definitely an interesting concept to drill down into. Commissioner Forcell.
Yeah, to further add to the speculation of what that 55% might mean, it's similar in spirit to Chair Siegel and Commissioner, I'm drawing a blank, Croft. The local press has done fairly big stories quite recently about undergrounding, and how, people thought we were on an undergrounding schedule and we're not, and as well as grid modernization. So I think that I think that could well explain the discrepancy that how people interpret that question and how it's being talked about in the community, and especially the press highlighting where Palo Alto stands with respect to what you might call modern infrastructure.
Right. I definitely believe that there is an opportunity for us to communicate more about what we are doing and how we are being proactive. And hence the next item on the agenda is going to touch on just that. So yes, great takeaways. Thank you. I want to just quickly note while we're on that slide real quick that 2/3 of CPAU customers indicated that their electric rates are very reasonable or somewhat reasonable, which is slightly higher than the state of California as a whole. That's good for us to, that's a good takeaway for us as well. And then also CPAU customers who had a recent customer service interaction provided higher ratings for 3 out of the 4 characteristics regarding the representative they spoke with. And that's compared to customers in Northern California and the state And then also CPAU customers reported a significantly higher average positive rating for the customer service representative they spoke with, being polite and courteous, which is higher than Northern California and the state as a whole. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, and this slide is just provides a visual snapshot of what we were looking at that table on the previous slide. Sometimes it's good just to be able to see these bar charts so you can see how one particular organization or utility in this case is trending in comparison to these other subset groups. So again, the average for CPAU ratings was about 71%, which we do consider to be quite positive. And then next slide, please. Actually go back to the previous slide. The top reasons that we found customers wanted to contact CPAU were to report an outage, not surprisingly, discuss a high bill or ask a question on a bill. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the methods of contact that customers prefer when they're reaching out to us. It tends to be more traditional method, such as telephone, our website, visiting us in person, versus receiving information from us as a utility. The preference is trending toward digital means of communications, meaning, yes, I want to have the information. Don't bug me though. But if I have an issue, I want to go directly to the source. Okay, now next slide. Thank you. Okay, so considerations. So electrification, we found in the survey results that the younger demographics aren't quite as aware about electrification and the programs that we offer for electrification. So we really want to make sure we're keeping that in mind in how we tailor our messaging and how we get the information out to those customers. So about half of the customers who responded are considering purchasing an electrification product of some sort. Those key differences are based on the age demographics. We did find that the younger demographics, while they may not respondents may not be quite as aware of electrification, when they learn about it, they seem to be more keen on adopting electrification. So there's an opportunity there. Now, the age demographic might have some interplay here because the younger demographic may not own a home. They may rent. They may not have the opportunity to convert appliances or provide major upgrades in their home. So that's something to keep in mind. The consultant provided some recommendations that we can tailor our messaging differently to those different age demographics, because the younger customers tend to believe that electrification will save them money on their electric bill, and that there's also an environmental benefit. There's a possibility that we might get a better uptake in our electrification program if we promote it during times of higher average energy consumption, and we demonstrate that there is a correlation between energy and cost savings. Next slide, please. And in looking at electric vehicles, we found that there is great interest in our customers to purchase an electric vehicle, and that they would also be more likely to charge that vehicle during off-peak hours. Also, when we drilled down into the different types of charging equipment, we found that customers would be more interested in installing a level 2 charger at their home with lower amperage, perhaps compared to a higher amperage level 2 charger that might be faster, if it would result in CPAU having to do less in terms of the electrical infrastructure upgrades at their home, thus being less costly. They'd be willing to take a slower charge and charge at home versus paying more for it. So one thing that the consultant recommended specifically is maybe down the future, we look at some sort of time of use rate that might further incentivize off-peak charging. I want to make it clear this is not staff's recommendation. As you are aware, there are limitations on how we can structure various time of use rates, but this is just the takeaway that the consultant provided us. And I think the interest in different types of charging infrastructure and time of charging is important for us to note. Yes, please.
Quick question while you're talking about EV charging. Back on page 7 of the presentation, packet page 32, You didn't talk about it when you were on the slide, but it says over 4/5 are likely to charge their electric vehicle during off-peak hours. How are off-peak hours defined on the survey?
I would have to get back to you on that. I don't recall the specific timeframe, but it was informed by staff. So I would probably consider that in the evening hours, maybe 6 p.m. at the start to maybe 6 a.m.
Interesting. Okay, so times that are
evening time.
that are very convenient for EV charging, but maybe not, I mean, that 4 to 6 p.m. doesn't strike me as what we would ever do for an honest to goodness off-peak rate.
I'm confused. I thought off-peak was during the middle of the day when the sun's shining because we have so much solar.
I would like to get back to you on those specific hours that were
pretty sure
defined
that's
rather than the
Well,
states.
I mean, that we're all presupposing what they might be, and that's kind of my point. Like, how can you ask a question when we have not, as utility, defined what is peak and off-peak?
Yeah, Dave Young, Utility Strategic Business Manager. Our peak rate is actually between 4 to 9. So everything else before 4 p.m. and after 9 p.m. is considered off-peak.
And this is for which customers?
Right now, I think we are applying that for both residential and commercial. I think, but we'll confirm.
We offer residential time of use rates?
Not right now, but that's what we're designing in our AMI project right now. So we're going to be mimicking what we have.
Okay, and the
for-
survey,
I think
define
is the
those
same.
for the people on the survey?
It would have been informed by staff who are actually working with Dave and Dean and others on looking at what would be considered off-peak versus peak and what, if we were to offer a time of use rate, what that time period would be, yes.
Okay, so the people in the survey were given
This specific
We're
time,
given
yes.
specific times.
I
All
just
right.
can't tell you
And they're very
specifically what
likely
that
to be
that hour was.
what Dave Yuan just said.
Yes, off-peak is after 9 p.m.
Okay,
through 4 p.m.
got it.
Okay, we can go back to yes, here we are. So this is just wrapping up the electric utility survey. These are really great questions and insights from you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the results from the water customer survey. So next slide, please. Okay, our ratings from water utility customers were also quite high, a little bit higher than our electric survey results. Our customers provided us with an average positive rating of nearly 80% when looking at the series of organizational characteristics, which I will also show to you similarly to the electric utility. And for water, the net positive score was a little over 87%. And of note, over one quarter of customers reported being either an advocate of or a loyal customer of CPAU. Being an advocate is quite a strong statement. I think we need to, that's a good takeaway for us, and we should feel very positive about that. CPAU received the highest ratings for maintaining an adequate supply of water and higher ratings than customers in Northern California and the state as a whole for this characteristic. And then 85% of customers indicated that CPAU meets their expectations all or most of the time. And about 81% reported being satisfied with their most recent customer service experience. Now, going into the key study findings, nearly half of our customers indicated that they try hard to use less water, but could probably do a little more, while nearly 2/5 indicated that they are already doing everything they possibly can to use water. But customers also indicated that they try not to waste water, but I often don't focus too much on the amount of water I use. And renters tended to respond in that way a little bit more than homeowners. Among customers, the top reasons for contacting CPAU, once again, were for a billing question, high bill or consumption, general maintenance, water leak or broken pipe. And again, more traditional methods versus receiving information from CPAU. They also tended to prefer digital methods. And that is consistent across all age groups. Okay, next slide, please. And here is the listing of organizational characteristics for water. And the average positive rating for CPAU was about 79%. And that's significantly higher than the average positive ratings from customers for both Northern California and this state. The top 3 characteristics included monitoring water quality, maintaining an adequate supply of water, and providing good service and value for the cost of the water. And conversely, customers place less importance on their utility valuing its customers and being committed to providing excellent customer service, communicating effectively with customers, and their community involvement. When asked how frequently the utility meets their expectations, again, over 4/5 of customers reported that their expectations were met all or most of the time. And customers who had a recent customer service interaction, also similar to electric, provided the highest positive ratings for that representative, indicating that that representative was courteous and treated them with respect. And over 1/2 of customers indicated that CPAU's customer service is among the best or above average compared to other service providers such as banks, the telephone or cable company, or other utilities. Next slide, please. We asked some questions about, here's the ratings by subgroup, similar to the electric utility. And again, this is just more of a visual snapshot to show you the aggregate of what was on the previous slide. Next slide, please. We asked about CPAU water programs and customers' familiarity with the programs. We discovered that over 2/5 of customers indicated that they are familiar with the WaterSmart Home Water Report Program, also the Landscape Rebate Program and Landscape Workshops. Those are programs that we promote quite consistently and readily to our customers. Fewer customers reported being familiar with Project Pledge, which is a utility bill assistance program. Significantly more homeowners reported being familiar with the Home Efficiency Genie than renters. About 89% of customers did acknowledge that CPAU provides them with data or a report on how much water their household used in the prior bill period. Interestingly enough, slightly more renters who received the household water consumption report indicated that this report is helpful, more so than homeowners, which I thought was not expected. Next slide, please. And then over 2/3 of our customers indicated that they would find materials on specific ways to reduce their household water use at no cost very useful. And so we're going to make sure that this takeaway is factored into our communication and our outreach, and that we are diversifying the information we put out to our customers. And next slide, please. So the considerations for the water utility based on the takeaways from the survey is that we really need to make sure that we're elevating and optimizing our online presence. This involves ensuring that our website is user-friendly and mobile responsive, but also provides seamless access to critical information, including important updates and educational contact and avenues for customer feedback and inquiries. We can communicate essential updates that way, such as our company operations and policies, while also creating opportunities to promote awareness of our programs and rebates. And then it's important for us to make sure we are strategically targeting our outreach to all customer groups, including renters who express desire to participate in the program or use water more efficiently, but may not know exactly how to do so. So this concludes our slides. I thank you very much for your questions throughout the presentation and the discussion, and we can entertain any additional questions.
I don't know if it's a question, but I was just looking up the demographics, and about 20% of Palo Alto residents are over 65 years old. And I do worry that they aren't reflected in this survey, and I do worry that that we just need to be sensitive. The more that we rely on digital communications, I think the more risk we have of missing that population. And it's a pretty significant portion of the population, and probably less turnover than some of the younger residents or customers. So it's just a comment. Everything done here was digitally. I appreciate that. It's faster, it's cheaper, all these great things, but I just don't want to miss those customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent point. And it's important for us to make sure that we are diversifying our outreach methods to make sure we're reaching everybody where they're receiving the information.
I was kind of interested on both surveys. I mean, the numbers are really good, so overall, it's nice to see that. I think on both surveys, though, there's a question about the utility being open and honest. Like, and in both surveys, I think it was like 2/3 of people said yes, but what are those 1/3 of people thinking? Like, what do they want to know that they're not knowing? I do think there's a bit of just, I mean, even for me, a learning curve on why, rates not being something that we can just change, stuff like that. So I wonder if there's an element of just educating. I don't know if that goes on the website or something, because I can't imagine you want to put that in a mailer, why rates are what they are. But I'm just kind of curious if there's any insight onto what people would want to know more that would cause 1/3 of people to say they don't believe the utility is open and honest.
I could speculate that some of that might be similar to what we were discussing with the electric utility, is talking about our operations, our maintenance, how we're maintaining our infrastructure and upgrading it. Certainly, rates are a very important topic. So we really try hard to provide education and information about our rates, what goes into it, why it's an important investment in our infrastructure, why rates change. And I don't have to, explain those reasons to you, but it is always a challenge to make sure that we are providing adequate enough information about those important topics, and again, reaching customers where they receive that and where they receive that. We're always trying to innovate and explore ways to improve on our communication.
I guess one thing might be FAQs. I'm not even sure if we have FAQs. I haven't gone to look, but if there are questions that we get that maybe are common, being able to provide answers.
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, just a couple quick questions on your slide 7, where you talked about 30% already own electrical and 47.4 have plans to buy. Are those mutually exclusive, or is there any overlap?
I'm sorry, could you state the question again, please?
This is under electric vehicle ownership and purchases, plan to purchase. So it's 30% owned, 47% say they plan to purchase. Is there any overlap there? Like, part of that is the 30% that are going to buy a second one, or is this actually predict by the survey that it's going to go up to 77%?
Excuse me. What we heard from our consultant in looking at the data is that folks who own an EV may not be as inclined to purchase another EV in the near future. So does that answer your question? But those who may not own an EV may be interested in purchasing an EV, but if somebody already owns one, maybe not getting a second one.
Yeah, it doesn't quite answer it, because I'm asking you if the 47% are going to be first-time EV buyers. Because 30% already have it. So is the next 47% going to be first-time buyers of an EV, not owners of EVs? Is that what that's really saying?
I would have to drill down into the details and get back to you with that answer.
Okay. And then the other thing I was just going to suggest/ask is that if some version of this could, at the very least, be attached to a council report as an information packet, or perhaps a more condensed version be presented in a short study session, maybe not as much detail. That's up to you guys, but this should get visibility at council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a 10-minute break and start back at 8 sharp. turn to item 4, which is a discussion of the electric grid modernization plan. Are there any comments from the public?
This is Janelle Camion, Program Assistant. If anyone from the public would like to speak on item number 4, please raise your hand or dial *9 on your phone. No hands raised.
Thank you. Do we have a presentation?
We do, Chair Siegel. So, just to talk a little bit about this whole grid mod and, why are we doing this in the first place? And what are going to be some of the benefits that are going to come out of there? I'll try to cover that in the overview and in the presentation portion of it. But, we're trying to accelerate the city's clean energy and decarbonation goals that we have set ourselves for Palo Alto. We can also increase our rooftop solars and our battery storages and make the system somewhat more reliable. One of the things that I see is that if you notice that typically when we have outages, they're large outages. And the reason for that is the way that the system is configured today is that we don't have a lot of switches in the system that allows when there's something that goes to fault, could be equipment, could be some type of weather issue, but it goes all the way back to the substation and it shuts down a substation. And there's usually between 4,000 and 5,000 customers on a substation. And if you notice, we usually are able to turn most of those customers back up, pick up 3,500, 4,000 customers, probably within it, depending on the time of the day, pretty quickly at that point. That's because we're able to go out, patrol where it's at, turn some switches, and then turn the substation back up. And, we were able to restore customers pretty much get it down to in the hundreds or less, depending on whatever the fault was. So one thing that that's how the system is configured today, and that's not the best for us. And we were going to have to do this upgrade to the system so that we can put type of mechanisms in place so that if there is a fault, that it will only take out the customers that where the fault is seen at, not all the way back to the substations, the way that it is configured today. So with this, we can take some advantages of our system as we rebuild this portion of it, is to increase some of the capacity so that we can get some new electrification loads. As you all know, is that right now is about the only thing we can really add on from a customer standpoint is heat pump water heaters. That's about the only load that we can pick, and that's the load, some pretty small load that the system will be able to handle. The other thing is to enhance that reliability and resiliency. And the last thing is to put those distribution system controls and using new technology that's out there. One of the things that we talked about is that, we're running this project together with the fiber. And one of the reasons that it makes sense is running fiber actually to some of this equipment that is more modernized today, that system operators have actually control of the substations today. They can turn a breaker from where they're sitting at the MSC. They're able to move that load where they need to move it to, but we don't have really anything in the field. So the idea is that as we develop this fiber and within this backbone portion of it, you can buy new transformers today and switches where you can actually run a piece of fiber to, and you actually have control of that piece of equipment. So we're able to turn those systems up a lot quicker, and we can clear faults much, much quicker. So with that, I wanted to go ahead, next slide, please. So just really about the system topology, residential customers, and the major projects that will happen. So I put this graph together a little bit just to kind of show a simple, starts at the generation, runs to the transmission that's owned by PG&E, and we have 3 transmission lines. Those 3 transmission lines run from the from a Redwood City standpoint, southbound into about where the Embarcadero and Greer Road is, which is right by the treatment plant, the golf course, out that in that area. There's 3 115 lines that are connected there. So we do have backup, but as many of you remember, back in 2010, Airplane took out those lines, took out the oh, sorry, not the pole, but the tower. And it really basically took the whole city down for about 12 hours. Now we have been talking about, and we've been talking about it to try to find another diverse route into town. We're still working on that route, trying to work through PG&E as well as a Kalos ISO to try to find that path with us. That's always ongoing conversations that we have with them. And then as it goes into those 3 lines actually go into that one transmission substation, which is Colorado. Everything comes into Colorado, and then at that point, it gets split to the 8 distribution substations. And then there's a 60 kV sub-transformer, that transmission that basically comes in at 115. We push it out to 60. And then the 60 then ties all of the substations together. And we do have some, as everybody knows, we do have 12 kV primary circuits. We also actually have some 4 kV primary circuits. And then we have ranges in those transformers anywhere from 5 kVs to 2.5 megawatts. So those are the large transformers that actually are sitting in those substation areas. And then as you can see, it kind of goes down the pole, and then it goes into the businesses, or it goes into the home, where we're running 122 40 volt to the residentials, and anywhere between, depending on the size of the commercials, anywhere from 480 primary voltage to 208 120 that goes into the commercial side. So this kind of just gives you a quick drawing of how that kind of goes along. Next slide, please. And then what we know today is that the average peak load demand for a residential customer is 3 kV. We know that we have to relocate and upgrade 200 amp services to customers at the standard fee, that portions of it, if the customer is going to fully going to go to a full electrification. We do have homes out there that have 60 amp panels still at their homes, and then also 100 amp panels. There's a lot of debate on smart breakers, that we might be able to use some of these 100 amp, and you put a smart breaker in there, and kind of splits the load at that point in the homes. But we're also seeing an uptick in homes that are putting in 400 amp services. There's nothing in between a 200 and a 400. Unfortunately, there's no 300 amp panel that we could get. It's not made. So you got to jump to that 400, and then that's where you get these customers are going to get invoiced for this additional expense determined on whatever the estimations and how far that goes back. Customer is responsible for any of the substructure work and the secondary cabling and the electric meter panel themselves. And then we, CPAU, is responsible for any of the infrastructure and the upgrades and the labor connecting the electric services. So as we put in the conduits, boxes, when the customer comes out to on the street side or in the sidewalk area, that's where our connection point is from a customer service for in an underground area, and from an overhead area, it's just really basically from the pole to where you're what we call a periscope with a weather head on it, where there's 3 wires that come out above your roof line. That's where the connection point gets put on for going to a home if it's in an aerial. Next slide.
So I just want to make sure I understand
Yeah.
that. So if a customer is in an underground area, they're responsible for basically from the street to their box, is that? And so even if a transformer's not right there, the rest of it is the city?
If the transformer is not loaded today, the way that the fees work today is that if the transformer is not loaded, and then you wanted to add, we have seen customers go ahead and put on EV chargers or this heat pump water heaters. At that point, that transformer can stay there, the wires that go from the transformer into what we call a secondary box, which is the box where the connection point is, that's our responsibility. But then it's the conduit or the wire that goes from that box to the side of the home in the underground is up to the customer's responsibility.
I guess maybe I just missed her. So do we charge a different fee for 200 amp and 400 amp service?
Yeah.
But it's not a standard fee for 400 amp? What does that mean?
When you put a 400 amp service in, now what you're going to do is you're going to change your wire size. Then you're also could be overloading the transformer size. And so an estimator actually has to come out there and take a look at that, where we actually have to have engineering drawings to actually look at what is going to be needed to be able to feed that 400 amp service. That 200 amp service, you can use a little bit smaller wire, goes right back into, in the conduit or overhead, and then to the transformer up on the pole or in the underground section.
And then, so we charge people, so it's really expensive to go from 200 to 400.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of homes probably really need 400.
Right now, we're seeing an uptick. We have seen that, I'd say probably from June, July timeframe to the end of the year, we had like 66 customers that actually wanted 400 amp services, which in the past, we might get 1 or 2 customers during a period of time. And the thing is, the reason why is that they know that, or what they want to do to their home to electrify, they know that their panel is not going to be able to handle the 200 amp panel if that's what they have on the side of their home.
So I actually noticed that. I think if I get another electric vehicle, I think someone told me that my 200 amp panel won't cover it and I'd have to go up.
That's quite possible.
So now I need to wait to get my electric vehicle to standardize the charge and make it easy. Otherwise it's too expensive. So it's your fault, Dean, that I don't have another electric vehicle.
Okay, you know what? Greg, I'll come out there personally. I won't charge you my labor. How's that?
What's the range or the average or the range that you're seeing for those charges for the 400?
Well, I think the thing is what we're seeing is that Tesla chargers, fast chargers, high-end chargers, that's what's pushing these, where you're ended up having to put another 50 amp breaker into the panel portion of it. That's taking that rating then of your panel that's pushing it past the 200 amp portion.
Right.
But a low level 2, you pretty much get away with that.
But no, what does it cost for those, those
sorry.
66 who had to go?
So on the average, it just on average ballpark cost, $3,200 to $3,700. Just to do the installation or to do the estimate, get the drawings taken care of, and then wire increase. But the panel cost is whatever I don't know what the average cost was because, we don't have any electricians on site. So I couldn't tell you what kind of price they paid for the actual install of the panel. I can only tell you what we charged for on the average portion of it. And then, if it triggers a transformer upgrade or if it triggered up bigger, it's much more.
Tens of thousands, right?
Yes, and we're talking tens of thousands of dollars. So what are we going to do in the future? So what we're going to do is as we rebuild this system, we're actually going to build 6 kVA expected peak load, which is right around 2 to 3 that are on the average today. Customers still receive standard invoices for the 200 amp services and development, the standard fees for the 400 amp service if they have to go to the 400 amp service portion of it. But the big key there is, you can leave it there, that's fine. Big key is that, we're going to double what is going into your homes capacity wise, depending on what you want to do. So some of the strategy portions around this grid mod is to upgrade the current infrastructure. We know that we have to, I think we've had conversations in the past that we need larger transformers. We need the larger cable in the secondary side. So remember that primary side's up on top, secondary side is actually where the customer gets connected to. So right now, that diameter of that wire has to actually increase to be able to pick up the extra load that's going to be going to the customer's home. So when we talk about cabling, there is some other slides here I'll get to. It'll break it out how much cabling that we believe, looking at our drawings, is actually going to know. Integrate new technology. We're off and running with our AMI system. We're hoping that our supply chain issue is coming better to us, so we're able to install much better. We think that probably by the end of this year, that we will have at least all the residentials in for AMI, and then we'll have to work on the rest of the commercial. Commercial meters are coming in very slowly at this period of time. Fault indicators, more better fault indicators. It's a term for in underground areas that helps us be able to tell which direction the fault is going. So if you went to a box and you opened it up and you have these fault indicators, if you think about if you ever had an oven thermometer in your oven that had the face that it gets hotter as it goes, this thing kind of looks just like that. It just hangs on the wire itself. So it has a little hook, has a face, it sits in the center. When the fault goes, it'll go left or it'll go right. And then what they can tell is this side is good because the fault is going to the right side. So then they go to the next box. Then they got to take a look and see, is that fault still going to the right? Then it's open up the next box. And this is the reason why when we talk about how long it actually takes us to do this, this is what we're looking for. And then the other thing is once the fault indicators are actually sprung one way or the other, you got to throw them away. They don't reset. But they're not that expensive a piece of equipment. Remote switching, as I talked about a little bit, and just some fuse savers. Customers technology, again, what we're trying to do is, having people that are able to get on solar. It seems like everybody is now having some type of battery backup portion of it in their homes, and then the heat pump water heaters in that. And as we talked a little bit about just around the fiber into the premise, CPA's new internet service provider, our goal is to upgrade to expand the existing backbone. And then also, depending on what happens with the pilot area, and going back to council at that point to get authorization to move forward, to offer it to all homes and all businesses. And to build a fiber connection to small businesses as well. We're going to try to pick up, some of these customers that we haven't been able to serve today. So a little bit about this is that upgrade the 4 kV installed in 67 to the 12 kV. We are actually doing that today as we speak. That's the first area, and that's the reason why we chose where in the map where the pilot is, and then also in that first phase. Upgrade for 30 substation transformers. We're going to upgrade 1,741 of the 3,000 distribution system transformers. So right now there could be 25 kV transformers out there that are feeding these homes that are around 2 to 3 kV. That 25 has been okay. There's some 35s that are out there. But what's going to end up happening is that we're going to have at least a minimum of 50s. So they're much larger, they're a little heavier, but they'll be able to put onto the pole side. 56 miles of secondary and then 17 miles of primary distribution line is necessary. And then complete the system to improve. In the phase is about 6,800 customers in that area that we'll have. I have a map here in a minute. Next, please. There we go. So again, you've seen this from a fiber as well as from the grid modernization map in the past. So the purple is where we're going to be going. There's 1,224 customers in that purple. That's where the pilot will be for fiber as well as the electric grid mod upgrade. And there's 409 poles that need to be replaced just in that area. And the reason for that is part of the,
Sorry, there's 409 poles in that area, place 87.
oh, 87. Sorry, thank you. That's a good point. 87 poles out of the 409. And part of that is that when we've done calculations and we start adding this extra equipment up on top, those poles are going to have to be replaced because they're not going to be able to take the weight of these additional 50s transformers that we're going to have to be doing. And then you can see down there represented in the phase is 6,800 customers And then there's a total of 1,650 poles in that area as well. Next page, please. So here's a typical looking at what an overhead design looks like. It's an upgrade to a 50 kV transformer. We're increasing the cable to replace the majority of the existing open wire in the rack secondary. So that's the wires that we're talking about. So right now it's 1/0 smaller wire. That's the secondary wire that needs to be replaced as customers get reconnected back onto the system. You can see fiber from the home comes off of the bottom section about 20 feet up in the air. Service drops then come from the secondary wire coming off of the transformer. So the transformer sits at the 12 kV. It drops it down to useful voltage that comes to our home, and then the wires connect to that secondary line that comes actually to our homes at that point. And so up to 8 customers on a 50 kV. So we're actually reducing the number of customers that are on transformers today, because we're going to be able to put this 50 kV up in the air. Should help reliability from that standpoint. Also, with the AMI project and adding this fiber, we'll be able to respond much more quickly to outages if there was an outage. And we're lowering the amount of customers that are actually going to be connected to each of these devices. Next. So approximately 1,400 single phase pole tops need to go up. So if you look at this picture here, if you look from the bottom up, so the very first, where you see the very dark black wire that has like a little square to the right-hand side, that's actually AT&T. And then right above that is Comcast. So that 20-foot section right there is just all comm in that area. And then you get up to the very tip top where the primary is on the cross arm. You see the trash can up there, which is the transformer. And then you see a kind of a grayish white wire kind of hanging down. That's actually that new secondary wire that it would be ran to each of the homes as we make these changes in this. So there's 56 miles of a secondary wire, so almost 300,000 circuit feet of secondary wire that's going to have to be changed out from the 1/0 to the 4/0. Next, please. And this is just a quick diagram of what we're going to do in the underground systems. So we are going to have to replace the smaller wire going from the home to actually to the home to the transformer. Transformers are going to have to be pad mounted transformers. They're all going to be 75s or larger in that. Then if the diagram on the right is basically showing you an underground transformer. We do have underground smaller transformers out there. Those are going to have to be pad mounted. They're going to have to be pad mounted like the picture on the left-hand side. There's no more companies that are building submergibles that we can find. And so we are going to take advantage of moving these transformers up in an underground area and reduce and replace again the same thing for the wire that has to be done on that. Now there is going to be 12 homes on each of these because again, we have 75 kVs that are going to sit there. We're in the 50s. We're only going to have those 8. But since we're putting a little bit larger of a transformer in, we're going to be able to move 12 customers only to each of those transformers. Next, please. So I just talked about.
Question?
Yes.
How many of these pad mounted transformers in total will there be? And do we have any now?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Do we have any of the pad mounted transformers now in the city, and how many will there be ultimately?
It's about 6,500 transformers in the system today, total, up aerial and under. I'd have to get back to you on the exact number. I would say there's probably going to be, let me get back to you.
Do we have any now?
Yes, we have. So everything that we have today is pad mounted with some exception of some of the older residents that were built way back when for underground.
Mhm.
And there is some underground transformers that are in the ground. This commission some years ago had to make some tough decisions about an underground area that needed to be rebuilt. The customers were not happy about coming above ground, because what ends up happening now is that if we all live in that area, you don't see anything.
Yep.
Now you're going to see this transformer and it's going to get put onto someone's front yard.
Yeah, that was my question about, so they're in people's front yards. They're not in the median strip or.
They're too big, unfortunately, to be in the medium strips, the base of them. They don't make a small enough transformer that would fit in between the curb and the gutter section. And we do have easement rights into in customers' front yards. And so it was a difficult task to work with the customers that we had to do this. But everything, the way the rules set today, and this is one of the turns, is when we want to underground and we want to go from aerial to underground, all those transformers are in the air. That transformer is going to become a pad mount, and it's going to actually have to be put somewhere. It'd be great if they could all be like set on the corner of the side street or on a street portion of it, but you can only go the distance so far to be able to keep your voltage regulated. So you can't put one at one block and then, 500,000 or 5,000 feet down, you can put another one and everybody can connect on. It doesn't work that way. So this is a very large size transformer that you see in the green. This is more like that you'd find in front of a commercial or some type of industrial customer, but they do make smaller, much smaller than that. But we do have pad mounts. The rules are is that when we go from overhead to underground, they're all going to have to be pad mount.
So there's people who currently have underground who will have pad mounted on one in roughly 10 to 12
Yes.
homeowners.
Yes.
This slide here actually
In their
gives the
yard.
count. There's 261 current transformers on pad mount and 231 underground.
Oh, thank you.
So all the 231 underground will be moved above ground. In addition, we have another 83 we have to add above ground to meet the capacity load. So there's going to be another 320 added above ground after this project is done.
It's be an interesting communication challenge. Thanks.
Yes.
I
Next, please.
was gonna say, sorry,
Oh,
on that
go ahead.
topic. I knew they had to come above ground, but I did not realize they'd have to be on people's properties. And so I live in Southgate, which is underground. And I wonder, I know we don't have to address this for a while, right? Because the underground section won't be built till later in the decade, but I think that's going to be a huge issue. And I wonder if there might be other ways to work with other areas of the city to figure out, for example, in our neighborhood, we have these catch basins for water that have been built, with native plants, and to avoid, so much water running off. And they've built them into the street a bit. So they've become like these basins that, it extends the sidewalk kind of into the street. It might take away a little bit of parking, but my guess is that a resident would way rather have a little bit of reduction in their parking than have a transformer on their actual property, like on their side of the curb. So I don't know if there's an opportunity to think about or try to look into options like that, which is, can you just extend the curb out into the street a bit, take someone's parking rather than muscle it onto their yard?
I think that what we heard from when we were doing this other project, that's definitely an option that we can look at. I think that what we heard though, from when we were trying to work in this project is that's still in front of my home. It's out on the street, or it's, you could expand maybe the curb line out a little bit, but it's like, why is it in front of my house? Why can't you move it to another area? And I think that that's going to be a question that we're going to have to try to find some options for. I mean, the one thing that is that were trying really hard was trying to maybe even push it to the side yard of someone's home. You know, there are mechanisms that you can put over the top to kind of camouflage some of this stuff. Put bushes around it as much as we can. But I think that's going to be it's going to be a challenging issue that we're going to have to deal with.
There are a couple big green boxes in our neighborhood that look kind of what I imagine these look like. I'm not sure that's what they are, but they are very well camouflaged with bushes. I mean, I don't see an issue with those. They're in the median, that area between the sidewalk and the street. And so I do think it's possible, and there are some examples in the neighborhood. I just don't know how much bigger these things are, so they might be a completely different story.
Thank you.
Did you say what the dimensions were?
So, you know, when we were looking at the ones that we had discussed in the past, those were like 4 by 6. So they're 4 feet wide, 6 feet tall. And the depth was about another 4 feet. So it's like a box of 4 feet and then 6 feet up. Now, there have been some changes in some of the design factors in some of these, and we are looking at much smaller portions. But what we need to find out is, can we get 75 kV sized transformers, and what are those sizes? So that's what we're looking at now. So we are trying to work on the underground section and how this is going to work, because we know that it's not going to be going out there and putting a shovel in the ground and being able to put these up. So we are looking now today, even though we don't have full design, but we know that approximately where these transformers are going to have to go, and because there's transformers already there in the underground section. So we're trying to look to see what the capacity is, and trying to spot where some of these could go that might not be such a eyesore in front of someone's home. Next, please. So some of the resources that's necessary, we've talked a little bit about Intrust. Intrust is a electrical contractor. They are the ones that are helping us with our design portion of as we move through this grid. Magellan, of course, is the company that we have hired for our fiber. And then Saudi, they are the ones that started off with the initial study on what we were going to have to do. And then we also have just from a contractor that can work on the lines and things, and the fiber portions of it is MP Next Level Hotline and VIP. MP Next Level and VIP, they are contractors that we have actually retained on the electric side to put in substructure for us on the secondary side, as well as VIP. There's a new company that came on board last year replacing Hotline, and they are contractors that do underground overhead work for linemen and things like that. The funding source on this, as we talked, somewhere between 200 and 300 million. That is something that we're still trying to figure out what is going and how much that is going to be. It's got to be a bond insurance, and then we'll also use some CIP funds as well to offset some of these costs. But that's what we think it's going to be, between $200 and $300 million as we move through the system. This also talks a little bit about some of the upgrades that we talked about in the substation areas of increasing the sizes of those distribution transmission transformers that are in the yards. And then also all the labor, all the materials that we've identified so far. Next, please. So here's a little bit of proposed on the timeline. Fall of 24, we're going to be done with the pilot area, both for fiber as well as grid mod. Summer 25, phase 1 will be complete. It's quite possible that most likely that fiber will lag in that timeline. And the reason for the lag is that we need to see what the uptick and what the take rates might look like. So there will be still in the pilot area. And then we have to go back to council to get approval if there's enough interest in this. Hopefully there will be. And then at that point, we'll be able to move forward with the fiber. Now, the one thing that we will be doing is we will be doing the make ready on the poles in this first phase, ready for fiber if fiber is approved by the council. It's just basically to do the make ready. It's really basically a piece of, if you think about, you've seen poles that have what they call a down guide that's kind of comes down to the side to kind of hold the pole upright. It's just a piece of cable that runs from pole to pole. And then when they bring the fiber back in, we put the fiber up and then what they call a lashing machine, and it just goes around and puts a small thin layer of wire around that fiber. So that work is much easier than trying to put up this other, we'll call it guide wire. That's going to be the main line that where you lash your fiber to. So if we are fortunate enough and we are able to show that fiber is take rates are good, then we'll be able to move through the first phase fairly quickly for fiber, but it will not be completed by 25. All phases will be done by the end of 2030. That's our goal. We will push if we need to bring in additional contractors to help us with this, but we want to make sure that we're done by the winter of 2023.
But I have one question for the financing. Once we figure out what amount of bond we want to issue, from that moment until, I don't know, funding or whatever, how long does it take? Will it require a vote? Are we going to try to sync it up with an election rather than a separate vote?
I think these are revenue bonds. It doesn't require a vote. It just requires council's approval.
And so it's just like bring it to council, they say yes, and then you go to bank or whatever.
Right. So I think the plan is to phase it in. So ask for 50 million increments for every phase. So I think with the bond funding, we have to spend it within the 3 years. But the plan is to debt finance it, yeah, over the next 7 years, or at least issue bonds over the next 7 years.
What is the point of the pilot? Is it primarily to look?
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt,
Oh,
but,
okay.
and I violated my own thought, but when you're done with the presentation, I was informed we have one community member who wanted to speak before we go into full commission discussion.
Okay.
So I apologize. That's my question.
Which one would you like first? Do you want have the community member speak now?
Well, I guess now that we've taken a pause, sure.
Okay.
Hamilton Hitchings, you may speak.
Hi, this is Hamilton. I request 5 minutes because I'm the only community member. I have a lot of good points.
Sorry, but we're going to keep you to 3 since we're off schedule with you.
Okay, so let me get going then. The one question I'd like you to ask is how much of that 220 to 306 million is for fiber, and if they're trying to slip any of the fiber in, or if it's going to be a separate bond from the electrical. You know, one thing to keep in mind is the utility has a monopoly on electricity and a guaranteed revenue stream for every subscriber. So when they pay electric, they can calculate the payback. Whereas for fiber, the consumer, the household chooses whether they want to go with the Palo Alto utility or AT&T or Comcast or whoever. So it really depends on the take rate. So I'm glad to hear that they're going to wait and get some data on take rates. I think that's really important before they go back to council for the bond, because it has been a financial train wreck for so many municipalities. My next point is that even though they are going to be continuing to do overhead, I think you can substantially improve system reliability if you underground the main trunks. So think of it like this. If you're to look at everywhere you could cut a line between a pole in Palo Alto, which of the lines where when you cut a line, it takes out thousands of homes or like high hundreds versus, you know, a few hundred homes. So like along the major arteries, across the major arteries, I think it's really important to underground. So whether it's El Camino University, San Antonio, Embarcadero, Page Mill, Middlefield, we want to underground around those so that we're not blocking traffic if there's a major earthquake or a big storm or something. And also, so when there is an outage, it's going to have a smaller impact than if you cut a line and lose 2,000 homes because it's close to a substation. So I hope, this, and the utilities are already doing this with some outside money along some of Page Mill and Embarcadero, but I implore the commission to push them a little bit further to do a little bit more undergrounding on high impact lines. Then just a couple of personal statements. I am in the process of electrifying my home, and I was going to do a 400, but for my panel, but when I used the utility calculator that the city provides, I realized I would only need it if I needed fast charging on 2 electric cars at the same time. And so I decided to go with 200 because it's just a lot easier. And then the last comment is, I recently upgraded my hot water heater through the city program. I saved about $6,000. I thought noise was going to be an issue. It wasn't. They have these new water heaters, which are even quieter than the Rheem, the A.O. Smith. So it's been pretty quiet. I wouldn't necessarily put it in your kitchen, but if it's in another room like a laundry room or the garage, it's no problem. So I would highly recommend folks consider that. It's a huge savings.
Thank
that you get
you.
through.
Feel free to send an email with any other thoughts.
Thank
you. And Commissioner Metz, did you have a comment?
Yes, I had a question. This is on packet page 69, which is, I think, 3 pages back. Grid modernization impact on CPAU infrastructure. And the question, first of all, thanks for Director Batchelor for speaking on this topic. The main question I have is about the last box on the right-hand side of the slide, integrating AMI and other customer technology. Particularly, what's the plan for this, and how does it impact the design of the distribution network, both the residential and commercial level? Because, I mean, so far this has been talked about as basically going from 3 kV typical residents to 6. But it seems like with all the technologies that you mentioned before, EVs and storage and such, and also if 80% of our load is commercial, it seems like there'd be a big opportunity for demand management. So how are those technologies that are mentioned here factored into the distribution grid design?
Commissioner Metz, so, we've kind of talked a little bit about the AMI portion. Let's just start there first. And is that the integration is that as we move forward, that's on a whole separate track. First of all, that has no track on this timeframe of the grid mod. As the AMI goes, there's definitely some advantages there. I think that as we were talking earlier tonight, that we'll be able to possibly by, I'd say maybe just an estimate of 2026, that we'll be able to offer time of use rates, because at that point we'll be able to put rate portions of it in. We'll be able to have customers look at their usage on the 15-minute interval portions of it. It helps the utilities as a whole to identify where there's an outage. We can ping those meters. We can ping the very last meter. If there's still power there, we can go down another block. So we can pinpoint and reduce the time of doing restoration and trying to do full-on patrolling of an area. So the technology aspects of it from an AMI is definitely a plus for us. And some of the other technologies that we talked about, and I think that one of your major initiatives is to look at resiliency within that system. And so one of the things that we've been talking about from an internal standpoint is, there's a couple of substations that are not fully loaded. And I've talked to engineering and operations that I've challenged them to take a look at it is that during this period of time, is there a possibility to change the feeder configurations? So right now, as you saw, we have actually 8 substations. So can we reduce down to 6 substations and take those feeders that are coming out of those substations and turn those into coming off of some of the existing 6? Yes, feeder lines will be a little longer, but as we put this technology in there so that we can be able to be able to run fiber to transformers so we have better ways of switching things around. But those existing 2 substations is to fill those with batteries for storage. Is there a way that we can utilize some of the parts that we already have and then tie those 2 substations with storage into the grid at periods of time that would allow us then to have better reliability than what we have even today if we built it brand new? So the challenge is to the staff is there a way that we can start looking at putting massive batteries into some of the existing substations and use it 100% storage and not as a substation as we see it today?
You mean storage to meet peak diurnal loads?
Well, I don't know if we're going to be able to make peak. I mean, that's the question: is how much can we get out of battery storage in a substation footprint? But can we use that for when there is outages, or can we also use that if we were asked upon them that they want to cut some power out of our grid because transmission is getting close, it's going to be over the top, so we have to shed, say, 7 megs of power. Well, can we utilize this battery and run it for 4 to 6 hours, 12 hours, depending on how much we can put in a substation? Then that's part of the studies that we're going to try to work through.
Okay. But in terms of let's say residential or commercial customer side technology, tell me if this is correct. It sounds like you don't believe that those technologies will enable us to reduce the size of the distribution grid.
No, I don't believe so. I don't think that technology is there yet. As you heard from Hamilton, one of the things to look at is that, do you put a slow charger in so that you can stay within your 200 amp panel portion of it? Or do you have to, if you really need the fast charge portion of it, then the cost goes extremely high for putting a 400 amp service in there. So I think that we need to, just looking at the average of adding up what the amperage portions of it is for these new technologies just around heat pump water heaters. Now we're going to put the furnaces in, and then you're going to go for induction for your stoves. We see that typical home with 1 charger is going to be close to that 6 kV.
Wow. Okay.
Load wise.
Okay, understood. Okay, well, again, thank you very much for addressing this topic in detail. It's super important and expensive.
Thank you.
So I guess my question is following also a little bit off of what Hamilton Hitchings said earlier about fiber and the timing of this. Is the idea of the pilot the sole reason for the pilot to figure out what the take rate is going to be on fiber? And this is going to be a multi-part question. Or are there other things we plan to learn that would help us decide? If it is, and it does sound like take rate of fiber is important consideration, I would personally like to see ahead of time, assuming it's going to come back to the commission, I would assume that also the council would like to see ahead of time an analysis of what's the minimum take rate you would consider to make the economic case for taking it to the city. And just for a number of reasons. I'd love to see that beforehand because I don't, like seeing the results and then kind of say, well, we saw the results and we came up with this criterion. So I guess that's kind of the structured set of questions, hopefully structured.
So let me answer the second question first. So we do have models already made, and we've made presentations to the council as well as to the commission in the past. We know what the break-even point is. We can send you the fiber report that shows what those take rates would have to be, and what those minimums would be, and then also it rolls it out to 30 years, and when we break even, if we kept with take rate of X, and then when do we can become profitable with those take rates?
I think I've seen those analyses, but is that then translating into a criteria that you would use and say, if the take rate's 35% or more, and I'm just making up a number, we're good to go and we recommend going forward. But if it's less than 22%, we recommend going forward with the rest of the update, but not including cable. That's kind of the question.
I think the thing is that, the model is set for us basically is that, those minimums, if we're going to be dropping below, if we get 15%, we're going to make the recommendation that we do not build fiber to the home. If it's 35, we're moving forward. Well, at least from a staff perspective, we're going to ask for, to move forward with building out the rest of the fiber. Now, as if I can answer Hamilton's question a little bit about that, that between that $200 and $300 million, that has no dollars allocated to the fiber fund. The fiber fund has, and we were given authority line to spend what we have in our reserves. We can't go over the top of our reserves, and that's kind of why the pilot phase is in there, because we don't want to spend 100% of the fiber. And that phase one, the pilot area does not spend all of the reserve monies at this point, but we think it's a good picture for almost 1,300 customers. 1,200 customers at that point. And so we want to learn from that a little bit and just see what we could get from a take rate standpoint. And then, I think that we don't have the authority line to spend more than what we have. And then at that point, we're going to have to do the same thing as what we're doing with this, is we're going to have to send out a bond, probably somewhere in the tune of probably 60 to 70, 90. Well, we got 35.
The total is 140.
140.
Total cost for the backbone and the fibers of the premise network is like 140.
Oh,
There's 35 in the fund now, approximately. Is that correct?
So 100 approximately. About 100 million then at that point that we would have to bond.
And then back to the first part of my question, are there other things you're expecting to learn or thinking we might learn from the pilot that would impact the cost or other things, or is it primarily focused on the take rate for the fiber?
It's not. So the one reason why we chose, it just so happened that, ironically, is that the area that we chose for the electric side is where the KV 412 for the 4 kV, where we need to upgrade to a 12. And it just so happens that when we were looking for space for the fiber hut, it made sense to put it at Colorado. Those two projects are really close together, and that's how the pilot was put together. And the idea was to put both of those together so that we can actually run some of the new technologies to these transformers that I talked about and to some of the switches, so that we're not spending a bunch of money of coming with a backbone that's going to come 3 miles away that we're going to have to deal with to actually get to that area to look and see. So we are looking at it twofold. What is the fiber future going to look like? But more importantly, what is it going to do to enhance us for our grid mod? And what can we do with the fiber that we're already going to be putting up in the area?
Thank you.
Couple of questions for me. The first one is quite specific. Packet page 62 lists among the technologies V2X, which I assume means vehicle to grid. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is that something that, like, we don't allow or enable that today, to my knowledge? Is that because our equipment does not support it? And then are we then installing equipment that will allow vehicle to grid?
So I think I've mentioned this in the past, that the way that our system runs today, it's just a one-way feed. So it only goes in one direction. So in this vehicle to grid portion of it, you actually needed to come, from the vehicle down through and then back in. Our capabilities today won't allow us to do that. And so,
is it on this list because we are installing equipment that will allow it?
yeah, the rebuilding of the system portion will allow that then to.
Okay, and what is the key piece that allows it?
So basically what ends up happening is that, you have to have some device that you're not going to feed back into the system, because the system is one-way feed right now. So
vehicle to grid will let people provide electricity to their own property, but not the grid.
right,
So it's vehicle to home.
home, yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we would
But
not.
we need grid level or distribution system level equipment to keep it from backfeeding the
Bleeding
grid.
back into the system.
And why is it bad to backfeed the grid? Solar systems do that.
Okay, so yeah, and when it backfeeds from a solar, it goes right directly into. But the key is that as this commission also had to struggle with, was, if you remember back when we were talking about permits, that we had to have those off switch and we were talking about 1, 2, 3, whatever the numbers were, right? So we finally figured that out, as you all know. But anyway, when you do the vehicle to your home portion of it, you're just actually plugging in like you do an extension cord, basically coming off. Then you have to there's got to be a switch, because you do not want that to feed back into the grid, because then what ends up happening is, if you're in an outage situation, that's probably most likely why you're going to do this, is that you're putting vehicle to grid or into your home. And the reason for that is because there's an outage going on. Now you're backfeeding back in.
Oh, it's a safety issue.
Yep, exactly.
I see.
Exactly. Because you're putting power into the grid when everybody thinks it's in the off position. And that's the reason why those switches that we talked about for solar was, we needed to shut those off so it doesn't feed back into, out into the system itself.
All right. Will that pilot area, will you be building that as part of that pilot?
Yes.
Well, it occurs to me that if we get to time of use rates, there might be reasons people would want to use vehicle to grid outside of there being a power outage, but I guess the same applies, that it would be mainly vehicle to the property. All right, my second question is far less specific. Palo Alto is poised to do a fair amount of new development of home building or housing development over the next several years. And so I'm just curious, how does our grid modernize to support potentially thousands of new housing units in, say, the south of the city, San Antonio corridor? And I assume those are going to be all electric, and I assume they're going to be net zero energy.
Yes.
So how does this project relate to those coming projects?
So when we first heard about, looks like that there's a strong possibility that that's where housing is going to go. So as we built, and we're still designing that piece of it, but it's all in the design phase, that when we build in that area, we will consider that we're going to put in larger transformers. We know that we're not going to put in a 50 when we know that there's going to be a 100 apartment complex going in, because we're going to have to change out the transformer at that period of time. But as we get closer and we're able to figure out what we need, from a transformer standpoint, because it's all in the secondary. It's really basically the feed line. It's not so much the main line, because we've got plenty of power. We can buy more power if we need more power. So
We
when
don't need, for example, a new substation or anything?
no, we have enough substation that we can do, even with, when we talked about the challenges, to maybe possibly shutting down two. Because what we're doing is we're changing the main transmission transformers. We're enlarging those. Right now, they're 25s. We're talking about putting in 50s. And as we build these out to 50s, and when we build anything new, it will be with the bigger wire for the secondary side that would be able to pick any kind of complex that we were going to do. So if there's 3,000 homes out there, we'll be able to pick that portion of it up.
Thank you.
Just want to thank you for providing all this detail. I know we were asking for it before, and it's great to, I mean, I learned so much from this presentation, and it's daunting to see how much equipment and how much work there is to upgrade all of this. And I think also we have to realize for every one of us that has a home attached to it, that there's going to be a lot spent for each of us to have this capacity. So thank you so much for this additional clarity. Look forward to the pilot and hopefully having it go well.
Thank you. I know that I struggled with this of actually what the commission was asking for, but with help with Dave, that helped me with this report portion to turn it around in a pretty quick time frame. I appreciate all the comments back that I'm able to answer the questions that you had tonight. And again, as this moves forward with both the fiber as well as the grid mod portion of it, we'll be giving updates on what's going on with as this pilot gets built.
Sorry, I had one, sorry,
Yep.
so close to being done. On the equipment piece, you just triggered my memory. In the past few years, getting equipment has been a challenge and has slowed down projects. And I noticed the way the timeline is structured, it's sort of one whatever overhead district or something, order the equipment, next order the equipment. And I'm wondering whether, without wanting, equipment that's obsolete, whether we want to think about maybe changing that approach with some of the equipment so that we don't get to a point where maybe we're held up because of that.
So one of the things that we've been that we did with procurement, which is our purchasing agency for people, is that in the past, we've always had to have a third party that goes through a third party. So they come to Dean Batchelor's Transformer Shop, we can't buy directly through their city rules. And it has been like that. And so then you got to go through the third phase person, and then that just pushes us back further in line when we want to buy equipment. We were able to prove that through this process that we can get better pricing directly than what we were getting in the past. So now we are shortening our window span because we're going to be dealing with the manufacturer directly, just like as Tesla did with their transformers. They went directly to the manufacturer. They were able to buy, and we're going to buy bulk, and that's going to be one of the pluses. We're going to buy bulk wire. We were worried a little bit about one-aught cabling, that it was going to be out about a year, and it's down to 36. Half of that. So it was going to take us a year to just get this cabling in, and we were able to find some different partners, and we got it down to 35 weeks of that cabling portion of it. So I think that, dealing with the manufacturers, knowing that what the outcome is going to be, and we're going to buy bulk because we're buying so many at this period of time. And the other thing, what we're trying to do is we're trying to standardize. We're trying to standardize the size of transformers. Like right now, I can tell you that there's a couple substations that got 15s. So when there's another substation that's got 25s in it. Colorado's pretty consistent because, again, that's our transmission area. But what the idea is that we're going to put in 50s in the substations. We're going to put in 50s in the overhead sections when we need to. We're going to put 75s in the underground sections that we need to. So we're not going to have this mixed match of that was a 15. We don't have any 15s. Now we're going to put a 25 back in there. So we're trying to standardize all the equipment that we have. It helps us with reordering. You know, it helps us with all the tools that has to be done from a splicing standpoint, how you make the connections, you standardize your connectors. This is the time that when we need to standardize everything we can as we build this system. We're not going to get this chance again. You know, the system was put in the 70s. You know, we're never going to see this again in our lifetime, that we really could do some things and get some better pricing on our costs.
Okay.
I just realized I have a very small question. Looking at the map on packet page 64, the one in your presentation, I think, was different than the one in our packet.
Yeah, the one in the packet is
that-
correct. The one in the presentation was an older version. I think we tried to balance out the North and South Palo Alto. So that's why the one in the packet is actually the most up-to-date version.
Okay. So, well, because my question was going to be, is it still in flux?
No,
Like, are you,
this
you
is it.
know, is every week it's like phase one is drawn differently, but you're saying
This
this
is it.
is,
at least
the
the pilot
final
is done.
plan.
All the design work has been done.
okay,
Whether or not the blue sections move around, I can't guarantee. But the red section is definitely not moving.
oh, no, I'm not talking about the pilot, I'm talking about phase one. Actually, maybe they both moved.
Yeah, I don't think the red moved that much, but the blue could potentially move still. So I wouldn't lock that
The
in yet,
blue did move between the
Yes.
packet and the presentation, and you're saying it could move again. It's
potentially.
still being, okay,
Right.
got it. So don't, yep.
Yeah, I guess I noticed some of that was undergrounded and some of it's not in the blue section.
Right. I think the plan now before is to move the undergrounding to the future phases. We didn't want to do any underground in the first phase because it'll slow down the project, the construction part.
Thank you so much. Super helpful. Really appreciate it. We can move on to commissioner comments and reports from meetings or events.
Oh, so we were, those of us that aren't on the subcommittee for budget did meet earlier. Was it last week already? I can't. To review a couple different topics, including the fiber business plan. These things are wastewater rates, a couple things that this commission asked for. I don't know if there's the ability to share those packets with the commission, but the wastewater question you had, Lisa, Commissioner Forcell, about the higher rate was presented at the budget subcommittee. I think there was support for the higher rate in rebuilding the reserve, since so many of the reserves are down. And then I think on the fiber, you know, it was very helpful to see the business plan, the financial model out. It didn't go out to 30 years in the one we saw, but I think it went out to 10 or 15 years. And I think it's a great idea that we're doing a pilot, just because the variables that you're talking about, the take rate in particular, really massively change the, you know, the financial attractiveness of that. So it was a very helpful meeting to go over those topics.
Thank you. And Commissioner Metz?
Yes, on January 25th, I participated in the heat pump water heater program status update. The core of this was a presentation by Assistant Director Ebenschein. I'll just summarize very briefly. There's great presentation output if folks are interested in more details. Basically, there's over 160 installs with about 270 completed or pending. But this boils down to about 12 to 20% of all water heaters per year. So, you know, to pave the city would still take quite a long time. The challenges that the program faces are lead generation, and then once leads are established, getting customers to advance. So there's a pretty strong multimedia promotional effort. There's also been a lot of outreach to participants for their feedback. And I would say the feedback has been very positive. The majority of folks who've installed heat pump water heaters are happy with the installations. overall good to excellent ratings for assessors among the people who took a look. And they're also very interesting, working to develop an emergency replacement program and get that launched by June, because the two reasons people cited for not going forward were cost and urgency. Their hot water heaters out. So there is an initiative to develop an emergency replacement program. So it was a great presentation, and I urge people interested to take a look at the details.
Great, thanks a lot for that. Any other comments? Great, and do we have, we'll move on to future topics for meetings. Any future topics to add to the list? The list is long.
I just have a question. I see the council is going to be hearing about the CLEAN program rules and agreement resolution and program rules update. It strikes me that that's something that would be of interest to the UAC. It feels like we've missed the opportunity to talk about it before council. Can we learn what that's about?
Sure. I think this is a one-off where there's a housing development. I think the change in the rule is just to extend it from 1 year to 3 years for the special housing development. I think that's how long it took for them to complete the whole process. So usually it's a 1 year process to join the CLEAN. Once you sign up for the application, you have a year to complete your side of your network, I guess, or your solar panels. Before the housing agency, it took a lot longer. And so I think we're adding a special rule in there for any future housing that meets minimum housing rules, that they can have up to 3 years to join the CLEAN program.
Is the CLEAN program the feed-in tariff?
Yeah.
I thought that was fully subscribed since a while back. Are we
There's still some
offering that
capacity
to
left.
new housing development?
I think there's some capacity left for the first tier. And then after that, it'll go to a lower payback.
I see. Okay. So there was a housing
Project.
development that had applied to be a CLEAN customer and didn't get it built in time, and it's being extended?
Right. And so we're allowing a 3 year window for any of these future housing projects
I
that meets
see.
the minimum requirements. Just to encourage them to join the CLEAN program.
And how much capacity is there left at the attractive rate?
I don't know. We can get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
That's a Jonathan question for sure.
Any other commissioner comments? Great. Oh, Commissioner Metz.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a topic or not, but I noticed in the packet, there was a resident comment regarding lead in water piping, indicating that CPAU would be required to have an inventory of water piping materials by October. And I'm not sure, I just want to raise this as a topic. Do we have one? Do we need one? If so, do we need a meeting to discuss it? I don't know the answer, but it seems like, obviously important if it's something we have to do.
We do. We do have a mandate of the October timeframe, and we are planning to bring back the results probably when we are able to finish this in October to the UAC to give an update on where we are, how many we actually found, what was going on, what's our plan then at that point if we do find these lead services. What is going to be our plan to actually replace these lead services? So we'll be coming back to you later part of the year once we're able to move this. We think that we're actually going to be done probably around August, September timeframe. We've been working on this now for a little bit of time, but there will be an update and a discussion about this.
Great. And with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So
I move we adjourn.
You can second it. Second. Great. And Phil, you can wave from there. Thank you, everyone.